The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? When a being arrives not through technology or natural phenomenon, but through the collision of two impossibilities that should never have touched. The USS Enterprise was in standard orbit around Deneva Colony when Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott initiated what should have been a routine transport. Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell and 3 security officers were beaming back from a diplomatic mission on the planet's surface. The transporter's annular confinement beam locked onto their biosigns, matter streams began their conversion to energy, and then reality screamed. On the transporter pad, something went catastrophically wrong. The matter stream didn't just destabilize, it intersected with a dimensional breach that tore through normal spacetime like tissue paper. Green lightning crackled across the pad as Scotty's hands flew across the controls, trying to save his crewmates from being scattered across subspace. "Captain." Scotty's voice carried over the intercom with barely controlled panic. "We've got a massive spatial anomaly intersecting the transport beam. I can't hold the pattern integrity." The Enterprise lurched violently. On the bridge, Captain James T. Kirk gripped his command chair as inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. Ensign Chekhov's console sparked, and Lieutenant Uhura's communications array shrieked with interference across all frequencies. "Mr. Spock, report," Kirk demanded. The Vulcan science officer's hands moved across his sensor displays with characteristic precision, though his right eyebrow rose fractionally, his species equivalent of profound shock. "Captain, sensors are detecting what appears to be a phantom zone dimensional breach. However, that technology is not known to exist in our universe. The breach is collapsing the transporter beam's confinement field and depositing something aboard the Enterprise." "Something? I am unable to classify it, Captain. The readings are unprecedented. Mass approximately 90 kilograms, but power output suggesting planetary-scale kinetic energy potential. It defies all known physical principles." The Enterprise shuddered again, harder this time. Warning klaxons blared across every deck. Then, impossibly, the ship began to fall. Orbital mechanics are precise. A starship in stable orbit doesn't simply drop from the sky, not unless something catastrophic has occurred. But the Enterprise was falling, dragged down by gravimetric forces that shouldn't exist, plummeting toward Deneva's atmosphere at accelerating velocity. "Thrusters firing," Sulu reported from the helm, his voice tight with concentration. "No effect. Something's pulling us down." Kirk slammed the intercom. "Engineering. I need warp power now. The dilithium matrix is offline, Captain." Scotty's brogue thickened with stress. "That spatial anomaly disrupted the matter-antimatter reaction. I need at least 3 minutes to restart the sequence." They didn't have 3 minutes. The Enterprise hit Deneva's upper atmosphere, hull plating beginning to glow with re-entry heat. The ship wasn't designed for atmospheric flight, its mass and velocity would turn it into a meteor that would impact the colony below, killing millions. On the view screen, Deneva's surface grew larger with terrifying speed. Then something appeared beneath the Enterprise. Something impossible. A figure, humanoid, wrapped in a billowing red cape, arms extended upward as if bearing an impossible weight. The figure was flying. Not with thrusters or anti-gravity technology, but simply flying through the sheer impossibility of his existence. And he was catching the Enterprise. The starship's descent slowed. Impossibly, against every law of physics Kirk understood. The falling ship halted its plunge. The figure beneath it, small, insignificant compared to the Enterprise's 190,000-ton mass, held the entire vessel aloft through nothing but raw strength. "Spock," Kirk said quietly, his command training the only thing keeping his voice steady, "what am I looking at?" "I do not know, Captain." For perhaps the first time in their friendship, Spock sounded genuinely uncertain. "Sensors indicate a humanoid life form. Male. Approximate age 30 Earth years. But the power readings. Captain, he is supporting the entire mass of the Enterprise through muscular force alone. This violates thermodynamics, conservation of energy, and approximately 47 other fundamental physical principles. The figure, the man, slowly, carefully, flew the Enterprise back to stable orbit. Once the ship's position was secure, he hovered outside the view screen, his cape rippling in the solar wind. His costume was striking, blue suit with red trunks, a flowing red cape, and on his chest, a stylized S symbol in red and gold. His face was kind. That's what struck Kirk most forcefully. Despite the godlike display of power, the man's expression carried compassion and concern rather than threat or arrogance. The man pointed to his ear, then gestured toward the ship, the meaning clear, "Can we talk?" Kirk nodded to Uhura. "Open a channel." "All frequencies." "Channel open, sir." The man's voice came through crystal clear, deep, confident, carrying a slight accent Kirk couldn't place. "I'm sorry if I startled you. I was caught in some kind of dimensional rift and found myself near your ship just as it began to fall. I couldn't just let millions of people die. Are you all right? Is anyone hurt?" Kirk exchanged glances with Spock and McCoy, who'd arrived on the bridge during the crisis. The doctor's expression suggested he thought they were all collectively hallucinating. "We're unharmed," Kirk replied carefully. "Thank you for the assistance. I'm Captain James T. Kirk of the United Federation of Planets Starship Enterprise. May I ask who you are?" The man smiled, warm, genuine, the smile of someone who'd answered this question 1,000 times before. "My name is Kal-El. But most people call me Superman." "Superman," Kirk repeated. "Appropriate name, given what we just witnessed. Mr. Superman, would you be willing to come aboard? I'd like to understand how you came to be here, and perhaps we can help you return to wherever you're from." Superman nodded. "I'd appreciate that, Captain. Though I should warn you, I'm not from your universe. Where I come from, I'm considered an alien. A refugee from a dead planet called Krypton. I suspect that's going to make explaining this situation complicated." "Mr. Spock specializes in complicated," Kirk replied with the slight smile that usually preceded either diplomatic breakthrough or spectacular disaster. "Transporter room, prepare to beam our guest aboard. And Scotty, make absolutely certain the transporter is functioning properly this time." "Aye, Captain," Scotty's voice carried wounded dignity. "Though I'll point out that spatial anomalies intersecting my transporter beam aren't exactly standard operating procedures." The transporter energized, and Superman materialized in a shimmer of golden light. He stood on the pad, cape settling around his shoulders, and looked around the transporter room with undisguised fascination. "Molecular transport," he said appreciatively. "We don't have this technology where I'm from. This is remarkable." Scotty, who'd been preparing a defensive speech about his equipment's reliability, found himself disarmed by the genuine enthusiasm. Well, it's a delicate system. Requires precise calibration and," he paused, staring at his console. "Sir, I'm still reading your biosigns, and they're not possible. Your cellular structure is absorbing and converting electromagnetic radiation at rates that would power a small city. What are you?" Superman's expression grew thoughtful. "That's the question, isn't it? I've been asking myself that for 30 years. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper." Kirk arrived in the transporter room with Spock and McCoy in tow, security officers flanking them with phasers conspicuously holstered but ready. Superman noticed the weapons but didn't react with alarm, merely the mild concern of someone who dealt with nervous authorities before. "Mr. Superman," Kirk began, extending his hand in the universal gesture of peaceful greeting. "Welcome aboard the Enterprise. I'm Captain Kirk. This is my first officer, Commander Spock, and our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Leonard McCoy. Superman shook each hand in turn, and McCoy's medical instincts immediately triggered. Good Lord, your grip, you're holding back, aren't you? If you squeezed at full strength, you'd crush bone like paper. I learned control a long time ago, Doctor, Superman replied gently. Where I come from, I have to be careful with everything I touch. It's lonely, sometimes. Being that different. Spock's eyebrow rose with interest. Fascinating. You possess godlike abilities yet express concern for the fragility of those around you. Most species with superior power exploit it. You appear to have developed a moral framework that prioritizes protection over domination. My parents, my adoptive human parents, taught me that power without compassion is just tyranny, Superman said. They raised me to believe that my abilities were gifts meant to help people, not control them. Then you and I are going to get along just fine, Kirk said, relaxing fractionally. Come on. Let's get you to sickbay for a medical examination. Then we'll figure out how to get you home. As they walked through the Enterprise's corridors, crew members stopped and stared. Superman towered over most humans, 6'3" of perfectly proportioned physique that suggested both incredible strength and surprising grace. His costume, wildly impractical by Starfleet standards, somehow seemed natural on him. McCoy's sickbay examination proved frustrating. Medical tricorders couldn't penetrate Superman's skin to perform standard biosigns. X-ray imaging revealed a skeletal structure that appeared human but with bone density approximately 400 times normal. Cellular analysis, from a strand of hair Superman volunteered, showed DNA that was vaguely humanoid but fundamentally alien. You're not human, McCoy announced, though his tone carried curiosity rather than accusation. But you're close enough that someone obviously designed you to appear human. Why? Convergent evolution, Superman replied. Krypton, my birth world, developed humanoid life along similar lines to Earth. We're not identical, but close enough to pass for human under casual observation. It's one reason my adoptive parents were able to raise me in secret. Spock leaned forward, his scientific fascination overriding Vulcan emotional restraint. Your powers, they appear to be solar-based. Your cells are converting electromagnetic radiation from our sun into kinetic energy, thermal energy, and what my tricorder classifies as biologically impossible force projection. How is this achieved? Honestly, I don't fully understand it myself, Superman admitted. Kryptonian physiology evolved under a red sun, much cooler and dimmer than Earth's yellow sun. When I'm exposed to yellow sun radiation, my cells supercharge. I become stronger, faster, virtually indestructible. Under a red sun, I'm just normal. Mortal. Kirk absorbed this information, his tactical mind already cataloging implications. So your powers aren't infinite. They have a source, and that source can be controlled or eliminated. Superman met Kirk's gaze steadily. Yes, Captain. If you're worried I might be a threat, you're thinking like a good commander. I respect that. But I'm not here to conquer or control. I'm here by accident, and I'd very much like to go home. My Earth needs me. There are people I protect, people I care about. They're probably worried. Your Earth, Spock repeated. You're suggesting parallel universe theory. That dimensional breach wasn't simply a spatial anomaly, it was an interdimensional gateway. The Phantom Zone, Superman explained. It's a Kryptonian interdimensional prison. Sometimes the barriers between it and normal space become thin. If your transporter technology intersected with one of those weak points. He gestured expressively. Here I am. Before Kirk could respond, red alert klaxons blared throughout the ship. Uhura's voice crackled over the intercom, Captain to the bridge. We're receiving a distress signal from the Deneva colony. They're under attack. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy sprinted for the turbolift. Superman simply blurred, moving faster than human eyes could track, and arrived on the bridge 3 seconds before the others. Crew members stared in shock as the caped figure stood calmly near the command chair, waiting for the captain to arrive. "Apologies," Superman said as Kirk emerged from the turbolift, slightly winded. "Old habit. When people are in danger, I don't wait." Kirk decided to address that particular breach of protocol later. Lieutenant Uhura, on screen. The view screen showed Deneva's capital city in chaos. Buildings burned. People fled through streets while strange, flying creatures, parasitic neural entities that the Enterprise had encountered before, swarmed through the population, attaching to victims and seizing control of their nervous systems. "Dear God," McCoy whispered. "The neural parasites. They're back." Superman's expression hardened, compassion transforming into determination. "Captain, those people need help. Now." "Agreed," Kirk said grimly. "But we need to understand what we're facing before." Superman was already moving toward the turbolift. Kirk realized with cold certainty that he couldn't stop this man. Phasers wouldn't work. Force fields wouldn't hold him. Security officers would be useless. Superman would go to Deneva because that's what he did. He saved people, authority, and protocols be damned. "Mr. Superman, wait," Kirk called. "If you're going down there, at least let me brief you on what we know about these parasites. And take a landing party with you. We work together, understood?" Superman paused, recognizing the compromise Kirk was offering. "Understood, Captain. Brief me fast." As Kirk outlined the neural parasite threat, creatures that seized control of human nervous systems, forcing victims to spread the infestation, Superman listened with complete focus. Then he asked a single question that revealed the fundamental difference between Starfleet protocols and his approach. "Can they be stopped without killing the hosts?" "We're working on it," McCoy said. "But we haven't found a solution yet." "Then we'd better find one fast," Superman replied. "Because I'm not about to let innocent people die, and I won't kill the victims to save them. There's always another way." Kirk looked at this impossible man, this alien god wrapped in primary colors and unwavering moral certainty, and recognized something he'd seen in mirrors after difficult missions. The weight of command. The responsibility of power. The absolute refusal to accept that some people simply couldn't be saved. "Then let's find that other way together," Kirk said. "Mr. Spock, Dr. McCoy, you're with me. Security Team Alpha, armed with phasers set to stun. And Superman?" Kirk's tone carried both authority and request. "Try not to destroy the colony while you're saving it." Superman smiled, the confident, slightly cocky smile of someone who'd heard that request before. "I'll be gentle, Captain. I promise." The transporter energized, and 6 figures materialized on Deneva's surface. 5 Starfleet officers in their red, gold, and blue uniforms. And 1 caped alien who represented everything humanity might become, or everything they should fear. On Deneva's burning streets, surrounded by thousands of possessed victims and swarming parasites, the rescue mission began. And James T. Kirk wondered if he'd just made first contact with a new ally, or unleashed a force that would fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy. Deneva's capital city had become a nightmare. The neural parasites, writhing, tentacled creatures that resembled nothing so much as airborne jellyfish with malevolent intelligence, swarmed through streets filled with screaming civilians. Infected victims moved with jerky, unnatural coordination, their eyes vacant, their bodies puppeted by alien nervous systems that had overridden human consciousness. Superman hovered 3 meters above the street, cape billowing in the smoke-filled air, his enhanced vision cataloging the crisis with devastating precision. Kirk watched the alien's expression shift through micro-emotions, shock, anger, determination, and beneath it all, a profound sadness that spoke of too many disasters witnessed, too many lives he couldn't save fast enough. "Captain," Superman said, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos, "I count approximately 15,000 infected within visual range. The parasites are reproducing exponentially, one creature splits into two every 90 seconds under optimal conditions. If we don't stop this in the next hour, the entire planet will be compromised. Spock's tricorder confirmed the assessment. The Superman's analysis is correct. The infestation growth is following a geometric progression. At current rates, planetary saturation will occur in 4.3 hours. Then we'd better move fast, Kirk decided. Security team, establish a perimeter. Phasers on stun, we're here to rescue, not execute. Dr. McCoy, start analyzing the parasites. We need a weakness. Spock, coordinate with the Enterprise. And Superman. Kirk paused, realizing he was about to give tactical orders to a being who could probably conquer the Federation single-handedly if he chose. Do what you do best. Save people. Superman didn't wait for further authorization. He blurred into motion, moving faster than phasers could track, becoming a red and blue streak that wove through the infected population with surgical precision. Kirk watched in awe as the alien performed rescue operations that defied belief. A woman fell from a fourth-story balcony, pushed by an infected neighbor. Superman caught her before she'd fallen 2 meters, deposited her gently with uninfected civilians, and returned to the rescue zone in less than a second. A building collapsed, weakened by parasite damage to its support structure. Superman positioned himself beneath 500 tons of falling debris, caught it on his shoulders, and held it aloft long enough for trapped families to evacuate. 3 infected Denevan security officers advanced on Kirk's landing party with weapons raised. Before Kirk could order his security team to fire, Superman interposed himself, moving so fast he seemed to teleport. Phaser beams struck his chest and dissipated harmlessly. He disabled the infected officers with precise strikes that knocked them unconscious without permanent harm. Remarkable, Spock observed, his tricorder working frantically to record data. He is functioning as a one-man rescue operation, emergency medical response, and security force simultaneously. I calculate he has saved approximately 473 lives in the last 6.2 minutes. Yeah, well, he's also drawing every infected person in a 5-block radius directly toward us, McCoy grumbled, though his tone carried grudging admiration. The parasites recognize him as a threat. They're coordinating an attack. Indeed, the infected were converging, not randomly, but with disturbing tactical precision. Hundreds of possessed Denevan surrounded the landing party, their expressions blank but their movements coordinated. And above them, a swarm of perhaps 2,000 free-floating parasites descended like a living storm. Captain, one of the security officers said nervously, we're surrounded. Should we fall back to beam-out range? Kirk's hand moved to his communicator, but before he could issue the order, Superman descended to street level, positioning himself between the landing party and the advancing infected. Captain Kirk, Superman said calmly, though his eyes glowed faintly red, heat vision, Kirk realized, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. I need you to trust me. I'm going to do something that might look extreme, but I promise, I won't kill anyone. Define extreme, Kirk replied warily. You'll see. Superman rose 10 meters into the air, drew a deep breath, and exhaled. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. A cone of Arctic wind erupted from Superman's mouth, freeze breath, carrying temperatures that dropped from Deneva's subtropical warmth to approximately -100 Celsius in seconds. The descending parasite swarm froze solid, thousands of creatures transformed into crystalline sculptures that shattered when they hit the pavement. The infected stumbled, suddenly released from parasitic control as their nervous system hijackers died. Confusion replaced blank possession. People collapsed, weeping, free for the first time in hours or days. Fascinating, Spock said, his voice carrying rare emotion. The parasites cannot survive rapid temperature change. Their cellular structure is optimized for humanoid body temperature, approximately 37 Celsius. Exposure to extreme cold causes immediate cellular rupture. McCoy was already moving among the freed victims, tricorder scanning rapidly. The hosts are unharmed. The parasites are dead, but the Denevans are just cold and disoriented. Superman, that freeze breath of yours, can you do that on a larger scale? Superman nodded, though Kirk noticed a slight dimming in his earlier confidence. I can. But there's a problem. My powers are running lower than normal. That dimensional transit, your ship's artificial lighting, something about this universe, I'm operating at maybe 75% capacity. I can clear this city, probably several cities. But a whole planet? I'd need time to recharge under direct yellow sun radiation. How much time? Kirk asked. Under your sun spectrum? Maybe 6 to 8 hours of direct, uninterrupted exposure. Kirk's tactical mind calculated rapidly. 8 hours meant the parasites would spread beyond containment. They needed a faster solution. Spock, can we replicate Superman's freeze breath effect using Enterprise technology? Negative, Captain. The energy requirements would drain our entire power reserves for a temperature drop sufficient to affect planetary atmosphere. However, Spock's eyebrow rose as a hypothesis formed. If we could determine the specific frequency of electromagnetic radiation that weakens the parasites, we might be able to broadcast it using the Enterprise's deflector array. The parasites are vulnerable to intense light, McCoy interjected, referencing his medical database. In our previous encounter, we eliminated them using concentrated ultraviolet radiation. But the intensity required killed the human host as well. We need something more precise. Superman's head tilted, his superhearing clearly tracking something the others couldn't detect. There are survivors trapped in a hospital 3 kilometers from here. The parasites have sealed the building, and I'm hearing at least 50 heartbeats growing weaker. They're running out of air. Kirk made a command decision. Spock, McCoy, work on finding that frequency. I'll coordinate with the Enterprise. Superman, do what you need to do. But please, try not to level any buildings we might need later. Superman offered a slight smile, appreciating the trust Kirk was placing in him, and launched skyward. He crossed 3 kilometers in perhaps 4 seconds, a red and blue blur against Deneva's smoke-darkened sky. Kirk tapped his communicator. Kirk to Enterprise. Mr. Scott, I need full sensor sweeps of the parasite creatures. Look for electromagnetic vulnerabilities, any frequency that disrupts their cellular cohesion without harming humanoid physiology. Captain, Scotty's voice crackled through subspace. But sir, we're detecting massive energy discharges at the Deneva General Hospital. Whatever your new friend is doing, it's reading like a photon torpedo detonation on sensors. Kirk exchanged glances with Spock. Elaborate. Sir, he just tore through a building's exterior wall, went through 30 centimeters of uranium-reinforced concrete like it was tissue paper. And now he's... Captain, he's carrying the entire building's ventilation system to the roof. With his bare hands. The mass of that equipment is approximately 16 metric tons. Noted, Kirk replied, trying to sound as if reports of impossible feats were routine. Continue analysis on the parasites. Kirk out. By the time the landing party reached the hospital, Superman had already evacuated 200 patients, medical staff, and visitors, carrying them in groups of 10 to 20, flying them to safety zones where the parasites hadn't yet spread. He worked with methodical efficiency, his expression focused, moving wounded on improvised stretchers, repositioning collapsed ceiling sections to clear evacuation routes, and periodically using heat vision to cauterize structural damage before buildings could collapse further. A Denevan doctor, elderly, exhausted, her medical coat stained with blood and dirt, approached Kirk with tears streaming down her face. That man, that impossible man, he saved us. We were trapped, the parasites were breaching the quarantine barriers, and he just appeared. Carried out the critical patients first, the children, everyone who couldn't walk. He's a miracle. He's an alien, Kirk corrected gently. But yes, doctor. He's quite remarkable. Spock approached, tricorder in hand, his expression suggesting significant discovery. "Captain, I believe I have isolated the frequency. The parasites are vulnerable to a specific ultraviolet wavelength, 280 nanometers, precisely. At that frequency, their cellular bonds destabilize while humanoid tissue remains unharmed. However, generating sufficient intensity across planetary scale would require using Deneva's sun as an amplifier." Superman finished, landing beside them with barely a sound despite his mass and velocity. "I've been listening to your analysis. Captain Kirk, I might have a solution. But it's risky, and you're going to think I'm insane." Kirk had learned over the years that when someone prefaced a plan with, "You're going to think I'm insane," they were usually correct. "I'm listening. Your ship can generate that specific UV frequency using the deflector array, correct?" "In theory," Spock confirmed. "But the power requirements for planetary coverage are prohibitive." "What if you didn't need to cover the planet?" Superman asked. "What if you could use Deneva's sun to broadcast the frequency across the entire system? Amplify your signal through stellar radiation?" Spock's eyes widened fractionally, his equivalent of shocked excitement. "The photosphere could theoretically act as a resonance chamber, amplifying our beam by a factor of approximately 10 million. However, reaching the sun would require subspace transmission, and directing such a beam with sufficient precision to avoid solar flare triggering would be extremely difficult. Or," Superman said quietly, "you could let me carry your deflector array's broadcast emitter directly to the sun's corona, position it at the optimal resonance point, and activate it manually." The landing party stared. McCoy broke the silence first. "Son, that sun's surface temperature is approximately 5,800 Kelvin. You'd be flying into a nuclear furnace." "I've flown through stars before, Doctor," Superman replied calmly. "Yellow sun radiation recharges my cells. The corona would actually restore my powers to full capacity while I work. It's perfect. I solve two problems simultaneously." Kirk processed this. Superman was proposing to fly into a star, position a broadcasting device with pinpoint precision, activate it to flood an entire solar system with parasite-killing radiation, and use the experience to recharge his depleted powers. It was either brilliant or suicidal. "Mr. Spock, analysis. Can he survive this?" Spock studied his tricorder readings on Superman's physiology. "Based on observed cellular structure and energy absorption patterns, I calculate an 87.3% probability of survival. However, Captain, we have no precedent for this action. We would be asking him to risk his life for a planet he has no connection to." "You have a connection to it, Captain Kirk," Superman said simply. "You and your crew. You're trying to save these people. That's enough for me. I don't need political treaties or strategic alliances to justify helping. I just need to know it's the right thing to do." Kirk studied this alien, this strange visitor from another universe who represented everything Starfleet claimed to aspire toward. Compassion without conditions. Courage without calculation. Power without corruption. "All right," Kirk decided. "We do this together. Mr. Spock, work with Enterprise Engineering to construct the broadcast emitter. Make it small enough for Superman to carry but powerful enough to transmit the frequency. Dr. McCoy, coordinate medical relief for the freed victims. And Superman." Kirk extended his hand. "When you come back from flying into a sun, we're going to have a long conversation about your definition of reasonable risk." Superman shook Kirk's hand, his grip careful despite his strength. "Captain, where I come from, I've faced alien invasions, dimensional warlords, and threats that could destroy reality itself. Flying into a sun to save a few million people? That's just Tuesday." "Then I suspect," Kirk replied with a slight smile, "that your Tuesdays are significantly more eventful than ours." 3 hours later, Superman floated in space 40,000 kilometers from Deneva's sun, holding a device approximately the size of a Federation photon torpedo. The Enterprise held position at safe distance, every sensor focused on their impossible ally. Mr. Superman, Kirk's voice crackled through the communication system. Superman had agreed to wear a modified Starfleet comm badge that could theoretically function even in stellar coronas. The device is armed and ready. Activate it when you reach optimal resonance depth. And Superman? Good luck. Thank you, Captain. See you in a few minutes. Superman accelerated toward the sun. His velocity increased, faster than impulse power, faster than anything the Enterprise could achieve in normal space. He became a streak of light approaching the blazing stellar mass, and then he dove into the nuclear fire. On the Enterprise bridge, sensor displays went wild. The sun's photosphere erupted with energetic distortions as Superman's mass, negligible compared to stellar scale but carrying impossible kinetic energy, penetrated the plasma layers. I'm losing his signal, Uhura reported with barely concealed worry. Solar interference is too intense. Maintain monitoring, Kirk ordered, though he knew they were blind now. Either Superman would succeed, or they'd just witnessed a being of godlike power immolate himself trying to save strangers. 2 minutes passed. 3. 5. Captain, Spock said quietly, statistically, if he has not activated the device by now. The sun pulsed. Every sensor on the Enterprise registered the change simultaneously. Deniva's star's output shifted fractionally, a minute adjustment in its electromagnetic spectrum that caused a specific ultraviolet wavelength to intensify across the entire solar system. On Deniva's surface, every neural parasite began to die. The creatures writhed, their cellular structures unraveling under radiation that was harmless to humanoids, but lethal to their alien biology. Within minutes, the infestation was eliminated. Millions of people found themselves suddenly free, confused and traumatized but alive. The frequency broadcast is successful, Spock confirmed. Parasite elimination is proceeding at exponential rates. Captain, he did it. But did he survive? McCoy demanded. For another agonizing 3 minutes, they waited. Then Uhura's console chirped with an incoming signal. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission. Audio only. It's him. Superman's voice came through, slightly distorted by residual solar radiation but unmistakably alive. Enterprise, this is Superman. Mission accomplished. The parasites are dead, and I have to say, swimming in a star is the most incredible experience of my life. I feel like I could move planets right now. Heading back to your position. And Captain Kirk? I owe you and your crew a debt. You trusted me when you had no reason to. That means something. Kirk allowed himself a smile of pure relief. The debt is mutual, Mr. Superman. The people of Deniva are alive because you were willing to risk everything for strangers. That's the kind of person, the kind of being, the Federation was founded to celebrate. Come on back. We'll break out the Saurian brandy and figure out how to get you home. As Superman flew back from the sun, fully recharged and radiating power that made Enterprise sensors struggle to maintain calibration, Kirk reflected on an uncomfortable truth. They just witnessed what one individual with godlike power could accomplish when motivated by genuine compassion. The Federation had worked for centuries to build a civilization where collective cooperation and democratic principles protected against tyranny. But what happened when one being could do more good in an afternoon than entire fleets could accomplish in months? And more troubling, what happened when other factions, Klingon, Romulans, or worse, learned that such power existed and decided they wanted to control it? Kirk had a feeling that Superman's arrival would change the balance of power in the galaxy. The question was whether that change would be for better or for worse. The Enterprise's recreation room had been hastily converted into a reception area for their extraordinary guest. Superman sat across from Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, a glass of water in hand. Saurian brandy, it turned out, had zero effect on Kryptonian physiology. The cape was draped over the back of his chair, and without it, he looked almost normal. Almost. So let me see if I understand this correctly, McCoy said, his southern drawl carrying equal parts fascination and disbelief. You were raised on a farm in Kansas, wherever that is, by human parents who found you in a spacecraft, and they just decided to keep you? No government intervention. No scientific examination. My parents hid me, Superman explained. This was Earth in the 1940s, my Earth, I should clarify. Different timeline, different historical development. If the government had discovered an alien child with developing superpowers, I would have become either a weapon or a laboratory specimen. Jonathan and Martha Kent chose to raise me as their son instead. They taught me right from wrong, compassion over fear, and that my abilities were a responsibility, not a privilege. A curious approach to xenobiology, Spock observed. Most cultures would view your existence as either divine intervention or existential threat. Your adoptive parents chose a third path, normalization through familial integration. They chose to see me as a person first and an alien second, Superman said simply. That made all the difference. Kirk leaned forward, his command instincts probing for understanding. But you didn't stay hidden. You became, what did you call yourself? A superhero? The press came up with that term, not me, Superman replied with a slight smile. I just wanted to help people. When I was in my 20s, I realized I could make a real difference, stop disasters, save lives, prevent wars. So I put on a costume, something distinctive enough that people would recognize me. But theatrical enough to maintain some separation between my public identity and my private life, and I started intervening in crises. And your government allowed this? Spock's tone carried genuine curiosity. An individual with planetary-scale destructive capability operating outside legal jurisdiction represents significant risk to civil authority. It's complicated, Superman admitted. Some government officials appreciate what I do. Others fear me or want to control me. I've been attacked by military forces, investigated by intelligence agencies, and accused of being everything from an alien invader to a fascist dictator. But I keep helping people anyway, because it's the right thing to do. McCoy shook his head in wonder. Son, you're either the most idealistic being in two universes, or you're dangerously naive. Power like yours, it corrupts. History proves that again and again. Doctor, I've spent 30 years resisting that corruption, Superman replied, and for the first time, Kirk heard something hard beneath the gentle tone. Every day I wake up knowing I could conquer the world before breakfast. I could rule through fear, enforce my will on entire populations, become the dictator everyone fears I might be. But I don't. Because my parents taught me that the measure of a person isn't their power, it's what they choose to do with it. A philosophy the Federation was founded upon, Kirk acknowledged. But Superman, you have to understand, here, in our universe, we've built civilizations based on collective cooperation and democratic principles precisely because we've learned that concentrating power in individuals leads to tyranny. Even with the best intentions. I know, Superman said quietly. Believe me, I've had this conversation before. With brilliant scientists, world leaders, even other heroes who think I should be doing more, or less. The truth is, I struggle with it every day. How much should I intervene? When does helping become controlling? Where's the line between inspiration and intimidation? Spock's eyebrow rose with interest. You experience ethical uncertainty despite your power. Fascinating. Most beings with godlike abilities develop certainty, either megalomania or messianic complex. You appear to have maintained philosophical humility. I try, Superman replied. Though I'll admit, there are days when the weight of it all, knowing I can't save everyone, that people die while I'm helping elsewhere, that my very existence might be preventing humanity from developing their own solutions, it's exhausting. Sometimes I wonder if the universe would be better off without me. The recreation room fell silent. Kirk recognized that burden. He'd felt it himself after losing crew members, after making command decisions that saved millions but killed dozens. The weight of lives in your hands, the impossible calculus of triage, the question of whether your intervention helped or simply delayed inevitable catastrophe. Mr. Superman, Kirk said carefully, I think I understand you better now. You're not a god playing at being human. You're a person trying to do right with abilities that make right impossibly complicated. Before Superman could respond, the intercom chirped. Bridge to Captain Kirk. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Comac wants to speak with you immediately. It's classified. Kirk's expression tightened. On my way. Mr. Spock, you have the con. Superman, I'm afraid I need to take this privately. We'll continue this conversation later. Of course, Captain. Kirk left for his ready room, and the moment the door closed, Admiral Comac's stern face filled the viewscreen. The Admiral was career Starfleet, a tactician who'd commanded through the Klingon border conflicts and valued strategic advantage over philosophical debate. Captain Kirk, I've reviewed your reports on the Denevan crisis and this. Superman. I need you to understand something very clearly. What you've encountered isn't just an interdimensional refugee. It's a strategic asset that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Alpha Quadrant. Kirk's jaw tightened. Admiral, Superman is a sentient being, not a weapon system. He's both, Captain, and you know it. Imagine what the Klingon Empire could accomplish if they acquired him, or even learned how to replicate his abilities. One being with that power could tip entire wars. And the Romulans? They'd dissect him in a laboratory and use his genetic material to create an army. Superman has made it clear he wants to return to his own universe. And if he can't? Comac interrupted. If the dimensional breach was a one-time event, then we have a being of godlike power in Federation space with no legal status, no chain of command, and the capability to ignore every law and regulation we've established. That's a threat, Kirk, no matter how good his intentions. Kirk chose his words carefully. Admiral, Superman saved Deneva. 4 million people are alive because he risked his life flying into a sun. That's not the action of a threat, that's the action of a hero. Heroes can become tyrants, Captain. History is full of examples. I'm not questioning his current intentions, I'm questioning what happens in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years when he's still invulnerable and everyone he cares about has aged and died. What happens when he decides that humanity can't be trusted to govern itself? That his judgment is superior to democratic process? With respect, Admiral, that's speculation. It's risk assessment, Comac corrected. And it's your job to manage that risk. I want him studied, Captain. Full medical and psychological evaluation. I want to know his weaknesses, his vulnerabilities, and how to neutralize him if necessary. And I want this done quietly before the Klingon or Romulans learn he exists. Kirk felt his stomach tighten. You're asking me to betray his trust. To treat a friendly alien as a potential enemy. I'm ordering you to protect the Federation, Captain. That's your oath. Now, I understand you've developed a rapport with this Superman. Use it. Get him to cooperate with the evaluation. Tell him it's standard procedure for dimensional refugees, tell him whatever you need to. But get me the information I need to make strategic decisions. Comac out. The view screen went dark. Kirk sat in his ready room, staring at the blank screen, feeling the weight of command settle over him like a leaden cloak. Comac wasn't wrong, Superman represented an unprecedented variable in galactic politics. But Kirk had looked into the alien's eyes and seen genuine goodness, the kind of moral certainty that came from years of choosing right over easy. Betraying that trust felt wrong. But failing to assess a strategic threat felt like dereliction of duty. Kirk tapped his intercom. Kirk to Dr. McCoy. I need you in my ready room. Bring your psychological evaluation protocols. When McCoy arrived minutes later, he took one look at Kirk's expression and sighed. Jim, what did Starfleet Command say? They want a full evaluation. Medical, psychological, tactical assessment. They want to know how to stop him if necessary. McCoy's face darkened. That boy just saved 4 million people by flying into a star, and Command wants to figure out how to kill him? That's gratitude. That's strategic reality, Bones. We can't ignore what he represents. What he represents is everything Starfleet claims to stand for. McCoy's voice rose. Courage, compassion, self-sacrifice. And now we're going to repay that by treating him like a threat. We're going to do our jobs, Kirk said quietly. Which includes understanding potential dangers. But Bones, I need you to do this evaluation carefully. Don't betray his trust, but give Command enough information to feel secure. Can you do that? McCoy was silent for a long moment. I'll do my job, Jim. But I won't like it. And I sure as hell won't participate in planning how to murder a man who's done nothing but help us. Noted. Now go prepare your evaluation. I need to have a very uncomfortable conversation with Superman. Kirk found Superman in the observation lounge, floating 3 meters off the ground in a meditative pose, legs crossed, cape hanging beneath him. The alien's eyes were closed, his expression peaceful, as if he'd found some inner calm despite being stranded in an unfamiliar universe. I didn't mean to intrude on your meditation, Kirk said. Superman opened his eyes and descended gracefully to the deck. You're not intruding, Captain. I was just listening. Your ship hums with life, 600 heartbeats, each unique. It's comforting, hearing all that vitality. Reminds me of home. Superman, I need to ask you something. And I need you to understand that I'm asking as a Starfleet captain, not as a friend. The alien's expression grew cautious. I'm listening. Starfleet Command wants a full evaluation of your capabilities, your physiology, your psychological profile. They need to understand what you are and what you represent. This is standard procedure for any new contact with potentially significant power, but I want to be honest with you, part of this evaluation is about assessing whether you pose a threat to Federation security. Superman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. Your superiors are afraid of me. They're cautious, Kirk corrected. And honestly, can you blame them? You have the power to destroy planets. You could ignore our laws, our governments, our entire civilization if you chose to. That's terrifying, Superman, even when the person wielding that power seems benevolent. Seems benevolent, Superman repeated. You know, Captain, I've heard that qualifier before. Usually right before someone tries to imprison me or kill me for the greater good. Is that where this is going? No, Kirk said firmly. But I won't lie to you, if you refuse this evaluation, Command will interpret that as hostile intent. If you cooperate, you demonstrate good faith and help us build trust. Your choice. Superman walked to the observation window, staring out at the stars. When he spoke, his voice carried the weariness of someone who'd had this conversation too many times. Captain Kirk, I could leave right now. Fly away faster than your sensors could track, find a remote planet, and you'd never see me again. I could refuse your evaluation, ignore your governments, and operate however I pleased. But I won't, because you're right, power without accountability is tyranny. I learned that lesson a long time ago. He turned to face Kirk. I'll cooperate with your evaluation. I'll answer your questions, submit to your tests, and prove that I'm not a threat. But Captain, understand this, if your government decides to treat me as an enemy despite my cooperation, I will defend myself. Not out of malice, but because I've learned that sometimes good people make terrible decisions when they're afraid. And I won't be imprisoned or dissected because fear overrode reason. Fair enough, Kirk said. And Superman? For what it's worth, I believe you're exactly who you appear to be. A good man trying to do right with impossible power. But I have to verify that belief with evidence. Command requires it. I understand, Captain. When do we start? Dr. McCoy will conduct the medical evaluation first. Then we'll proceed to psychological and tactical assessments. This will take several days. Then let's begin, Superman said. The sooner we establish trust, the sooner we can focus on finding a way to get me home. My Earth needs Superman. Every day I'm gone. People might be dying because I'm not there to help. As Kirk escorted Superman to sickbay, he reflected on the cruel irony. In Superman's universe, he was a hero fighting to save lives. Here, he was a threat to be assessed, catalogued, and potentially neutralized. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, Kirk knew, other factions were undoubtedly learning about the godlike alien in Federation space. The Klingon would want to recruit or kill him. The Romulans would want to study and weaponize him. And Superman, caught between universes, would have to navigate political complexities as dangerous as any supervillain he'd ever faced. The question was whether he'd survive with his idealism intact, or whether the Federation's fear would transform an ally into the very threat they feared he might become. McCoy's medical evaluation took 3 days and produced results that simultaneously fascinated and terrified Starfleet Command. Superman's cellular structure absorbed electromagnetic radiation with impossible efficiency, converting photonic energy into biological power through mechanisms that violated thermodynamics. His skin was effectively impenetrable, medical lasers couldn't cut it, phasers on maximum setting couldn't burn it, and when McCoy attempted to extract a blood sample using a standard hypodermic, the needle shattered. "I've been a doctor for 23 years, McCoy announced to Kirk and Spock during the evaluation review, and I've never encountered physiology this impossible. His bones are denser than duranium. His muscle tissue generates force through quantum-level manipulation that shouldn't exist in biology. And his brain, Jim, his brain processes information approximately 300 times faster than baseline human cognition. He's not just strong, he's a living supercomputer wrapped in invulnerable armor. And his weaknesses?" Kirk asked, knowing Command would demand that information above all else. McCoy's expression darkened. "Red sun radiation weakens him significantly. Exposure to his home star's wavelength would reduce him to baseline human, or roughly baseline. He'd still be stronger than average, but vulnerable. Mortal. And there's something else." He pulled up a spectral analysis. "I had him scan a chunk of irradiated ore we keep in the xenobiology lab, standard dilithium with trace contaminants. When he looked at it with his X-ray vision, he collapsed. Acute radiation poisoning, weakness, pain. Turns out one of those contaminants was fragments from a green crystalline substance mixed in the ore matrix. Kryptonite," Superman had explained weakly from the biobed, his normally perfect complexion pale and sweating. "Radioactive fragments from my destroyed homeworld. Even trace amounts are lethal to Kryptonians. In my universe. It's rare, most of it was destroyed with Krypton. But here." He'd managed a bitter smile. "Apparently, your universe has its own version, probably formed through similar geological processes on different planets. Just my luck." Spock had immediately requested samples and begun analysis. Within 12 hours, he'd identified 17 mining operations across Federation space that extracted ores containing kryptonite isotopes mixed with standard dilithium. The substance was uncommon but not impossibly rare, and now represented the Federation's primary deterrent against Superman's power. Kirk found himself deeply uncomfortable with this knowledge. They'd befriended an alien, gained his trust, and now possessed the means to kill him. It felt like betrayal, even if it was strategic necessity. The psychological evaluation proved even more revealing. Lieutenant Commander Helen Noel, the Enterprise's staff psychologist, spent hours interviewing Superman, exploring his motivations, fears, and ethical framework. Her final report was 17 pages of detailed analysis, but Kirk focused on the concluding paragraphs. Subject demonstrates remarkable psychological stability despite godlike capabilities and chronic social isolation. He experiences guilt over inability to save everyone, suggesting healthy emotional responses rather than messianic delusions. Most significantly, subject shows consistent pattern of seeking limitations on his own power. He deliberately maintains secret identity to preserve normal human relationships, follows local laws even when he disagrees with them, and actively seeks guidance from authority figures he respects rather than assuming his judgment is superior. Clinical assessment: subject is not a megalomaniac, sociopath, or potential tyrant. He is, paradoxically, an idealist constrained by practical wisdom. He understands that unlimited intervention would create dependency and stifle human development. So he consciously restrains himself to emergency situations. Recommendation: subject should be treated as ally, not threat. His psychological profile suggests he would rather die than become the authoritarian figure Federation command fears. Kirk found Superman in the Enterprise's Arboretum, a small garden section that provided both psychological respite and oxygen recycling. The alien sat beneath a simulated earth oak tree, reading a data pad containing Shakespeare's complete works. Hamlet, Superman said without looking up. I'm finding his uncertainty refreshingly human. To be or not to be, the question of existence, purpose, and whether action or inaction causes greater harm. Relevant to my situation, wouldn't you say? Kirk sat beside him on the bench. Superman, I've reviewed the evaluation reports. I know Command received them too. I want you to know, the findings were positive. Dr. Noel believes you're exactly who you claim to be. But Command still views me as a threat, Superman said quietly. I can hear them, Captain. Your ship's bulkheads aren't thick enough to block superhearing. I've heard the strategy sessions, the contingency planning, the discussions about how to neutralize me if necessary. They're building weapons using that kryptonite material. Synthesizing it, creating radiation emitters, designing warheads. Kirk's stomach dropped. Superman. I don't blame them, the alien interrupted. Honestly, I don't. If I were in their position, discovered a being with my power operating in their territory, I'd do the same thing. It's responsible leadership. But Captain, it's also profoundly lonely. I've spent my whole life being feared even by the people I save. I'd hoped that in a universe of interstellar civilization and advanced ethics, maybe things would be different. But they're not. Fear is universal, apparently. It's not just fear, Kirk argued. It's caution born from experience. The Federation has encountered godlike beings before, the Organians, the Metrons, Q, and they've always represented complications or threats. You're different, I believe that. But proving it to an entire government takes time. Superman set down the data pad. Captain Kirk, I need to tell you something. I've been using my enhanced senses to scan this region of space, and I've detected something troubling. There's a cloaked vessel following the Enterprise. It's been shadowing us for approximately 47 hours, maintaining a distance of 200,000 kilometers. The cloaking technology is sophisticated. I can only detect it because I can see across multiple spectrums simultaneously, including gravitational lensing that your sensors miss. Kirk's command instincts engaged immediately. Configuration: bird-like hull, approximately 120 meters. Energy signature consistent with plasma weapons. Based on your database files, I'd classify it as Romulan design. Romulans, Kirk breathed. The Romulan Star Empire, secretive, strategic, and utterly ruthless. If they'd learned about Superman, they'd want to acquire or eliminate him. How long have you known? Since they started following us. I didn't mention it earlier because I wanted to see what they'd do. Whether they were just observing or planning action. Captain, they're charging weapons. I think they're about to attack. Kirk slapped his communicator. Kirk to bridge. Red alert. Romulan vessel decloaking off hour. The Enterprise shuddered as disruptor fire hammered into shields. Kirk and Superman sprinted for the turbolift, reaching the bridge in seconds. The view screen showed a Romulan bird of prey, its distinctive predatory design gleaming as it maneuvered for another attack run. "Shields at 68%, Sulu reported. They hit us before we could raise full deflectors. Return fire." Kirk ordered. "Mr. Spock, hail them. Demand their intentions." But the Romulan vessel didn't respond to hails. Instead, it transmitted a message in Romulan, which Uhura quickly translated, "Attention Federation vessel. Surrender the alien entity known as Superman or be destroyed. The Romulan Star Empire claims salvage rights to all interdimensional refugees in contested space. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction and the seizure of your ship's remains. Contested space." Kirk's voice carried dangerous quiet. "We're well within Federation territory. This is an act of war." Another disruptor barrage struck the Enterprise. Shields dropped to 42%. "Captain," Spock reported grimly, "the Romulan vessel is significantly more powerful than standard birds of prey. I'm reading enhanced weapons arrays and reinforced hull plating. They have upgraded specifically to engage targets they anticipate will put up significant resistance." "They came hunting me," Superman said, standing near the command chair. "And they're willing to destroy your ship to get me. Captain Kirk, permission to handle this?" Kirk knew what Superman was asking: permission to leave the ship, engage the Romulan vessel directly, and end the threat through overwhelming personal force. It was tempting. But it was also exactly what Command feared: Superman taking independent action that could escalate into interstellar incident. "Negative," Kirk decided. "We handle this through Starfleet protocols. Mr. Sulu, evasive maneuvers. Photon torpedoes, full spread. Let's show them that attacking a Federation starship has consequences." The Enterprise maneuvered, its superior agility allowing it to evade the heavier Romulan vessel's firing arcs. Photon torpedoes streaked out, impacting the bird of prey's shields. But the Romulan defenses held, and they returned fire with plasma torpedoes that sent the Enterprise reeling. "Shields at 19%, Chekhov reported. One more hit like that and we'll have hull breaches." "Captain," Superman said urgently, "I can end this without killing anyone. Let me disable their weapons, their engines. I'll leave their life support intact. They'll drift harmlessly until a Romulan rescue ship retrieves them." Kirk hesitated. Using Superman as a weapon violated Federation principles about individual autonomy and collective action. But letting his crew die to preserve those principles was command negligence. Sometimes ideology had to bend to survival. "Do it," Kirk ordered. "But no casualties. Disable only." Superman moved to the turbolift. "Transporter room, beam me into space directly between the Enterprise and the Romulan vessel. And Captain, watch closely. This is what I do." Moments later, Superman materialized in the vacuum of space, no environmental suit, no life support, simply existing in hard vacuum as if it were breathable atmosphere. The Romulan vessel altered course, attempting to target him with disruptors. He moved. The speed was incomprehensible. One moment Superman floated stationary, the next, he'd crossed 200 meters and impacted the bird of prey's forward hull section. The collision generated an energy discharge visible on sensors as the Romulan shields absorbed and failed against kinetic force they weren't designed to handle. Superman tore through the shield envelope like it was tissue paper. His hands, bare, unprotected flesh, gripped the Romulan ship's weapons array housing and simply crushed it. Disruptor banks imploded. Plasma torpedo launchers bent and collapsed. Within 30 seconds, he'd stripped the vessel of offensive capability without penetrating the hull or harming the crew. Then he moved to the impulse engines. Heat vision, concentrated beams of thermal energy, sliced through engine cowlings with surgical precision. The drive sputtered and died, leaving the Romulan ship adrift and helpless. Superman floated back to the Enterprise, cape billowing in solar wind, and signaled for transport. When he materialized on the bridge, every crew member stared in awe and fear. Romulan vessel disabled, Superman reported calmly. Their crew is unharmed. Life support, communications, and emergency systems are intact. They're no longer a threat, but they can contact their government for retrieval. Kirk found his voice. Hail the Romulan vessel. The view screen showed a Romulan commander, female, her expression caught between rage and genuine fear. What are you? I'm Superman, the alien replied simply. And I'm not anyone's salvage or weapon. Tell your government that. Tell them the Federation has an ally who won't tolerate attacks on their ships. And tell them that if they come hunting me again, I won't be so gentle with their next vessel. The Romulan commander's eyes narrowed. You have made an enemy of the Star Empire today, alien. We do not forget. We do not forgive. I'm not asking for friendship, Superman replied. Just respect. You attacked first. I responded with restraint. Learn from that. The transmission ended. Kirk turned to his science officer. Mr. Spock, analysis. Fascinating, Captain. Superman neutralized a military vessel in 1.3 minutes using nothing but physical force and thermal energy projection. His tactical efficiency is extraordinary. He targeted only offensive and propulsion systems, leaving crew quarters and life support untouched. This was not mindless destruction but surgical precision. It was also an act of war, Kirk said quietly. We just disabled a Romulan military vessel in response to their attack. The Star Empire will claim provocation. They'll demand we surrender Superman or face military consequences. Then they'll be disappointed, Superman said firmly. Captain, I won't let your ship be destroyed because of me. And I won't let the Romulans use me as a weapon or a laboratory specimen. If they want war over this, I'll make it very clear that war with me is unwinnable. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Kirk replied. Superman, you just demonstrated that you can destroy military vessels single-handedly. Do you understand what that means politically? Every faction in the galaxy now knows that whoever controls you, or whoever you ally with, gains overwhelming tactical advantage. The Klingon will come next. The Tholians. Maybe even factions within the Federation who see you as a weapon to be deployed against our enemies. Superman's expression hardened. I'm not a weapon, Captain. I'm a person. And I don't take orders from governments or militaries unless I choose to. That's not arrogance, it's autonomy. The same autonomy every sentient being deserves. Autonomy backed by godlike power, Spock observed. A philosophical conundrum. You claim the right to individual agency, yet your actions have interstellar political consequences. At what point does personal autonomy become de facto dictatorship? When I start telling people how to live their lives instead of just protecting them, Superman replied. I save people from immediate threats, natural disasters, criminal violence, wars of aggression. I don't rewrite laws, overthrow governments, or impose my values through force. That's the line I will not cross. But you just crossed it, Kirk said quietly. You disabled a Romulan military vessel. You took independent military action that will have consequences for the entire Federation. Superman, I'm grateful you saved my ship. But you also just made a strategic decision that affects billions of people without consulting any government or authority. That's concerning. The bridge fell silent. Superman looked at Kirk with an expression of profound weariness, someone who'd had this argument across decades, across universes, and found no satisfactory answer. Captain Kirk, I respect you. I genuinely do. But I need you to understand something. I've spent 30 years being second-guessed, investigated, attacked. And condemned by authorities who were afraid of what I represented. I've been patient. I've cooperated. I've proven my intentions again and again. And it's never enough. There's always another evaluation, another test, another demand that I submit to control. He moved toward the turbolift. I'll cooperate with your government because I believe in what the Federation stands for. But I won't be imprisoned, weaponized, or dissected. I won't let fear turn me into the threat everyone claims to worry about. And if that makes me a political problem, Captain, then I'm sorry. But I'd rather be a free problem than a controlled asset. Superman left the bridge. Kirk sat in his command chair, feeling the weight of impossible decisions. He'd just witnessed a being of godlike power operate with restraint and precision. But he'd also witnessed that same being take independent military action that would have galactic consequences. Captain, Spock said quietly, we face a unique situation. Superman's ethics appear genuine, his self-restraint remarkable. But his very existence challenges the fundamental principle that power should be distributed through democratic institutions rather than concentrated in individuals. I know, Spock, Kirk replied. And I don't have an answer. How do you integrate a god into a democracy? How do you trust that restraint will last forever? And how do you explain to him that even with the best intentions, his power makes him fundamentally incompatible with the civilization he's trying to protect? On the view screen, the disabled Romulan vessel drifted, a monument to both Superman's power and the political crisis that power had just created. And somewhere in the vast darkness, Kirk knew, the Klingon Empire was learning about this encounter. And planning their own response. The summons came 3 days later. Starfleet Command ordered the Enterprise to proceed immediately to Starbase 11, where a Federation Council delegation would convene to address the Superman situation. Kirk knew a tribunal when he heard one, even if they weren't calling it that. Superman took the news with resigned acceptance. I've been through this before, Captain. Different universe, same fear. Let's get it over with. The journey to Starbase 11 passed in tense silence. Crew members who'd initially viewed Superman with awe now regarded him with uncertainty. The Romulan incident had demonstrated his capability for violence, however justified. Even those who supported him intellectually felt the primal unease of being near a predator who chose not to hunt. Only a few crew members treated him normally. Lieutenant Uhura brought him Earth music recordings, jazz, blues, classical symphonies that made him smile with homesick recognition. Ensign Chekhov engaged him in spirited debates about political philosophy, the young navigator's optimism matching Superman's idealism. And Dr. McCoy, ever the humanist, simply invited him to sickbay for bourbon and conversation about what it meant to be alone in a universe that feared you. You know what gets me, Superman? McCoy said during one late-night session, pouring generous glasses of Kentucky's finest. You've got all the power in the world, 2 worlds, actually, and you're one of the loneliest people I've ever met. You can hear every heartbeat on this ship, see through bulkheads, fly faster than our sensors can track. But you can't have a normal conversation without worrying you'll accidentally crush someone's hand. Can't get angry without risking heat vision incinerating whoever you're looking at. Can't even really touch another person without constant vigilance. Superman stared into his bourbon, which didn't affect his Kryptonian metabolism but which he drank anyway for the ritual of it. Doctor, I've been holding back my entire life. Every handshake, every hug, every moment of human contact requires calculation. When I was 17, I was angry about something trivial, teenage drama, a girl who didn't return my feelings, and I punched a barn wall. The entire structure collapsed. That's when I truly understood what I was. Not just strong, but dangerous. A threat to anyone who got close. And yet you keep trying to connect, McCoy observed. Most people with your power would retreat into isolation. Become hermits or tyrants. You keep seeking out relationships even though they're painful. Because the alternative is becoming the monster everyone fears, Superman replied quietly. If I stop trying to connect with people, stop caring about their fragility, stop seeing them as equals despite the power gap, that's when I become dangerous. That's when I become the threat your Federation Council is convening to assess. McCoy raised his glass. To the hardest job in the universe, being strong enough to stay gentle. They drank in companionable silence, two souls recognizing kindred loneliness in each other. Starbase 11 loomed ahead, a massive orbital facility that served as both military installation and diplomatic center. The Enterprise docked without ceremony, and Kirk escorted Superman to the conference chamber where the tribunal, not officially a tribunal, but functionally identical, would convene. The chamber was impressive, curved walls displaying the Federation seal, observation galleries for press and interested parties, and a raised platform where 5 Federation Council members sat in judgment. Kirk recognized 3 of them, Ambassador Sarek of Vulcan, Spock's father, Ambassador Nancy Hedford of Epsilon Canaris III, and Admiral Comac representing Starfleet Command. The proceedings began with cold formality. Ambassador Hedford spoke first, her voice carrying diplomatic neutrality that barely masked underlying fear. This council has convened to address the presence of the being designated Superman within Federation space. We acknowledge his assistance during the Denevan crisis and appreciate his stated intentions. However, we must also address concerns raised by his demonstrated capabilities and the political complications his presence creates. Superman stood before the council, cape pooling behind him, hands clasped respectfully. He'd chosen not to sit, partly because chairs designed for humans were uncomfortable for his dense physiology, partly because standing suggested he wouldn't be cowed by authority. "Ambassador, I understand your concerns," Superman said calmly. "I've heard them before in my own universe. You're afraid that power without oversight leads to tyranny. You worry that today's benevolent protector becomes tomorrow's dictator. You see me as a threat to democratic institutions because I can ignore your laws, your borders, your entire governmental structure if I choose. Those are legitimate concerns. Then you acknowledge the problem your existence poses?" Admiral Comac pressed. "I acknowledge that my existence is complicated," Superman corrected. "But I don't accept that complication equals threat. I've spent 30 years operating in a universe where governments tried to control me, weaponize me, or eliminate me. I've been patient. I've proven my intentions through action. And I'm still treated with suspicion because people can't accept that power might be wielded responsibly without external control." Ambassador Sarek leaned forward, his Vulcan logic engaging. "Superman, your argument contains a logical fallacy. You claim your restraint proves you are not a threat. However, restraint is a choice, not a permanent condition. What guarantee can you provide that your benevolence is not merely a temporary state that could change at any moment?" "None," Superman admitted bluntly. "I can't guarantee my future behavior any more than you can guarantee yours." "Ambassador. Every sentient being possesses free will and the capacity for moral failure. The difference is that when I fail, the consequences are catastrophic. I understand that. I live with that knowledge every day." "Which brings us to the central question," Ambassador Hedford said. "Can the Federation afford to have a being of your power operating within our territory without oversight, accountability, or legal constraints? Can democracy survive a god who answers to no authority but his own conscience?" Before Superman could respond, Captain Kirk stepped forward. "Madam Ambassador, with respect, you're framing this incorrectly. Superman isn't asking to operate without accountability. He's asking to be treated as a person rather than a weapon system. There's a difference. Captain Kirk, you are here as a witness, not an advocate," Admiral Comac warned. "Then let me testify as a witness," Kirk replied firmly. "I've observed Superman under crisis conditions. He saved 4 million Denevans by flying into a star. He disabled a Romulan attack vessel without killing a single crew member when he could have destroyed it instantly. He has consistently chosen restraint when overwhelming force was available. These are not the actions of a tyrant in waiting. These are the actions of someone who understands his power and fears misusing it." "Pretty words, Captain," Comac replied. "But actions speak louder. Superman disabled a Romulan military vessel, an act of war, without authorization from any Federation authority. He took independent military action that has since triggered a formal protest from the Romulan Star Empire and threats of border incursions if we don't surrender him for trial. His restraint, as you call it, has brought us to the brink of interstellar conflict. Superman's jaw tightened. Admiral, that Romulan vessel attacked the Enterprise unprovoked. They demanded my surrender with the explicit threat of destroying your ship and crew. I defended Federation personnel and property against illegal aggression. Would you prefer I had allowed Captain Kirk and 600 crew members to die rather than violate your protocols? We prefer you had allowed Starfleet to handle the situation through proper channels, Comac shot back. By the time your proper channels responded, everyone on that ship would have been dead, Superman replied, his voice rising slightly with frustration. This is the problem with bureaucracy when facing immediate threats. People die while you debate proper procedure. Gentlemen, Ambassador Sarek interjected with Vulcan calm, this is unproductive. The question before us is not whether Superman's actions were justified in the moment, but whether his long-term presence in Federation space represents acceptable risk. I propose we address this logically. Sarek stood, his robes flowing as he approached Superman with clinical detachment. You possess the capability to destroy planets. Correct? If I chose to, yes, Superman admitted. Though I never would. Your intentions are irrelevant to the calculation, Sarek continued. The capability exists. You can also ignore our laws, borders, and military forces. You cannot be imprisoned, controlled, or stopped through conventional means. The Federation's primary defense against tyranny, collective action through democratic institutions, is ineffective against you. Therefore, your presence represents an existential vulnerability in our governmental structure. Ambassador, with respect, that's a theoretical vulnerability, Superman argued. I could destroy planets. I could become a dictator. But I won't. My moral framework prevents it. Moral frameworks can change, Sarek replied. Vulcans understand this better than most species. We were once violent, emotional, driven by passions that nearly destroyed our civilization. We changed through conscious adoption of logic and discipline. But that change required centuries. And collective effort. You are a single individual whose moral restraint represents our only protection against your power. That is unacceptably fragile. The observation gallery murmured with agreement. Superman looked around the chamber and saw it, the fear in their eyes, the rational terror of beings who'd built civilization on law and cooperation encountering someone who transcended both. So what are you proposing? Superman asked quietly. Exile. Imprisonment. Execution. We propose regulation, Ambassador Hedford said, producing a data pad. The Federation Council has drafted the Metahuman Oversight Act, a framework for beings of extraordinary power operating within Federation space. Under this act, you would be granted provisional citizenship contingent on accepting monitoring, regular psychological evaluation, and obtaining authorization before taking any action that could affect Federation security. Superman took the data pad and read rapidly, his super speed allowing him to absorb the entire document in seconds. His expression darkened with each paragraph. This isn't regulation, he said finally. This is indentured servitude. You're asking me to accept tracking devices, submit to mind scanning, obtain permission before helping people in crisis, and allow Federation scientists to study my physiology, for the collective good. This isn't oversight, it's imprisonment with extra steps. It's the price of operating in civilized space, Admiral Comac replied. Power requires accountability. You want to help people? Fine. Do it within a framework that protects democratic institutions. And if I refuse? Superman's voice carried dangerous quiet. Then we invoke Starfleet General Order 24, Comac said flatly. You will be declared a threat to Federation security and subject to neutralization using any means necessary. Including the kryptonite-based weapons we've developed. The chamber went silent. Kirk felt his stomach drop. They were threatening to kill Superman, a being who'd done nothing but help, because he wouldn't accept gilded slavery. Superman set down the data pad carefully, and Kirk saw something shift in his expression. The gentle idealist who'd arrived seeking friendship was hardening into something more dangerous. Not malevolent, but resolute. Cornered. "I've tried to be reasonable," Superman said, his voice carrying across the chamber with perfect clarity. "I've cooperated with evaluations, proven my intentions, demonstrated restraint. But you're not interested in cooperation. You're interested in control. You see me as a threat that needs to be neutralized or weaponized, and you're too afraid to accept any alternative." He rose into the air, not dramatically, but with calm certainty, hovering 3 meters above the chamber floor. The gesture was unmistakable. "I am not bound by your gravity, your rules, or your authority. I won't accept your oversight act," Superman declared. "I won't be tagged, tracked, and treated like a dangerous animal that needs constant supervision. I came here by accident, I've helped where I could, and I've asked for nothing except basic respect. But that's apparently too much to expect." "Superman, you're making a mistake," Ambassador Hedford warned. "If you reject this agreement, you force us to treat you as hostile." "Then treat me as hostile," Superman replied, though his tone carried sadness rather than aggression. "Activate your kryptonite weapons. Deploy your fleets. Do whatever your fear demands. But understand this, I will defend myself. I will not allow you to imprison or kill me because you're afraid of what I might do someday. I've spent my life being judged for potential crimes rather than actual actions. I'm done apologizing for existing." He looked directly at Kirk. "Captain, you've been a good man. I appreciate your friendship and your attempts to bridge this gap. But your government has made their position clear. They want a controlled asset or a dead threat. I won't be either." "Superman, wait," Kirk began, but the alien was already moving. He blurred through the chamber's walls, not destroying them, but phasing through at super speed with such precision he left no damage. Security alarms blared. Starbase defense systems activated. And Superman disappeared into space faster than sensors could track. "All units, red alert." Admiral Comac shouted. "Deploy kryptonite defense perimeter. Target the Superman and prepare to fire." Kirk grabbed Comac's arm. "Admiral, you can't. He hasn't attacked anyone. He's fleeing, not fighting. He's a threat that just rejected Federation authority," Comac snarled. "That makes him an enemy combatant. Now release me, Captain, or I'll have you arrested for obstruction." Kirk let go, watching helplessly as Starbase 11's weapons systems powered up. Kryptonite radiation emitters activated, flooding the surrounding space with the deadly green wavelength. Defense satellites fired tracking beams, searching for Superman's thermal signature. But he was already gone, moving faster than their systems could track, fleeing into the vast darkness where civilization's fears couldn't reach him. Spock approached Kirk quietly. "Captain, I calculate Superman's trajectory based on residual energy signatures. He is heading toward the neutral zone, specifically, toward Klingon space." Kirk's blood ran cold. The Klingon. Indeed. If Superman seeks allies after the Federation's rejection, the Klingon Empire would view him as the ultimate prize. A warrior of unmatched prowess who just demonstrated willingness to defy Federation authority. "Captain, we may have just driven our greatest potential ally directly into our enemy's hands." Kirk stared out the observation window at the stars where Superman had vanished. They'd had a chance, a genuine opportunity to befriend a being of godlike power who actually wanted to do good. And they'd squandered it through fear and the need to control. Now that power was loose in the galaxy, angry and betrayed. And somewhere in the darkness, the Klingon were preparing to offer what the Federation wouldn't: respect without conditions, alliance without slavery, and the chance to fight alongside warriors who valued strength over suspicion. Kirk had a terrible feeling that the galaxy was about to learn what Superman was capable of when his patience finally ended. Superman crossed the neutral zone at velocities that made warp speed look pedestrian. Rage and betrayal fueled his flight, not the blind fury that might have driven him to destruction, but the cold anger of someone who'd extended trust and had it weaponized against him. Again. He'd tried. He'd cooperated with their evaluations, proven his intentions through action, demonstrated restraint when overwhelming force would have been easier. And the Federation had responded by demanding he accept monitoring devices, psychological conditioning, and the permanent status of a controlled weapon. He thought of his adoptive parents, Jonathan and Martha Kent, long dead in his universe but forever alive in memory. They'd taught him that people were fundamentally good, that society's rules existed to protect the vulnerable, and that his powers were a gift meant for service. But they'd also warned him that fear could make good people do terrible things. The Federation was afraid. Understandably, rationally afraid. But their fear had transformed potential friendship into hostility. Superman's superhearing detected energy signatures ahead, a large vessel, Klingon configuration, holding position just inside the neutral zone. They'd been waiting for him. Somehow, they'd known he would come. The Klingon battlecruiser was massive, a D-7 class vessel bristling with disruptors and photon torpedoes, crewed by warriors who'd spent generations perfecting the art of violence. As Superman approached, he expected weapons lock, perhaps a warning shot. Instead, the ship's communications array activated. Alien warrior, a voice rumbled in accented Federation standard, "I am Commander Kor of the Imperial Klingon Defense Force. We have observed your conflict with the Federation. You fought with honor, showed mercy when destruction would have been easier, and refused to become their slave. These are the actions of a true warrior. We would speak with you. Not as enemies, but as those who recognize kindred spirit." Superman hesitated. The Klingon were enemies of the Federation, aggressive expansionists who valued conquest and glory in battle. Everything Starfleet had taught him suggested they would try to use him as a weapon against their foes. But Starfleet had also tried to control him. At least the Klingon were being honest about their intentions. "Permission to come aboard," Superman replied. "But Commander Kor, understand this, I won't be used as a weapon by you either. If this is a recruitment attempt, you're wasting both our time." Kor's laugh boomed through the comm system. "Warrior, we do not recruit. We offer alliance between equals. Come aboard. Share blood wine. Let us discuss what it means to have power in a galaxy full of those who fear it." Against his better judgment, or perhaps because his judgment was clouded by betrayal and exhaustion, Superman flew into the Klingon vessel's shuttle bay. He materialized before a delegation of warriors in ceremonial armor, their expressions mixing curiosity, respect, and the predatory calculation of apex predators encountering a potential rival. Commander Kor stood at the center, a legendary Klingon warrior with silver hair, elaborate armor bearing the symbols of countless victories, and eyes that had witnessed decades of glorious combat. He approached Superman without fear, studying him the way a master swordsman might evaluate a new blade. "You are smaller than I expected," Kor observed. The report suggested a giant. "But I see now, your power is not in size but in density. Every cell optimized for strength, yes. Fascinating. Our scientists would love to study you." "They won't get the chance," Superman replied firmly. Kor's grin widened. "Good. A warrior who values autonomy. Come, let us drink and speak of important matters. My crew will not disturb us." The commander's quarters were surprisingly Spartan, weapons on the walls, a meditation alcove, and a table bearing a bottle of blood wine alongside 2 goblets. Kor poured generously, offering 1 goblet to Superman. "This is blood wine, aged 20 years, from my family's private reserve. It honors warriors and celebrates battle. Drink with me, Superman of Krypton." Superman took the goblet but didn't drink immediately. "How do you know I'm from Krypton?" "I never told the Federation that name." "Because the Romulan Tal Shir interrogated their captured crew," Kor explained casually. They learned everything your Federation discovered about you, and they shared that intelligence with us. An unusual gesture, the Romulans rarely cooperate with anyone. But they fear you, Superman. They fear you enough to warn their enemies that something unprecedented has entered the galaxy. That fear is your power. Fear isn't power, Superman countered. It's a tool of tyrants. Then you misunderstand fear, Kor replied, drinking deeply from his goblet. Fear is respect given involuntarily. The weak fear you because you could destroy them. The strong fear you because you represent challenge to their dominance. Both recognize that you are force that cannot be ignored. This is not tyranny, this is reality. Superman finally sipped the blood wine. It was potent, even his Kryptonian metabolism felt the alcohol's burn. Commander Kor, why am I here? What do the Klingon want? What we have always wanted, to fight alongside warriors who understand that strength must be exercised, not hidden. Superman, the Federation tried to cage you because they believe power should serve collective. They think democracy requires all individuals to submit to group decision, even when group is wrong. This is weakness disguised as virtue. Kor refilled his goblet. Klingon understand different truth. Power exists. It cannot be wished away or regulated into submission. The question is whether power is wielded by those with courage to use it, or hoarded by bureaucrats who fear its exercise. You chose courage when you rejected Federation's chains. That is why we offer alliance. Alliance to do what? Superman pressed. Attack the Federation. Conquer their worlds. I won't be your weapon, Commander. We do not need weapon, Kor replied with surprising gentleness. We have weapons. Disruptors, torpedoes, warriors by the millions. What we need is symbol. Proof that might does not require apology. That strength can exist without submission to those too weak to wield it. He stood, moving to the viewport where stars wheeled past. The Klingon Empire faces challenge, Superman. For generations, we expanded through conquest and glory. But now, Federation spreads through different means, diplomacy, trade, cultural exchange. They make war seem primitive. Make warriors seem barbaric. They shame strength and celebrate weakness as civilization. And you want me to validate violence, Superman said flatly. To prove that might makes right. No. Kor turned, his expression carrying unexpected passion. I want you to prove that might can exist without shame. That warrior who chooses restraint is not same as weakling who cannot fight. The Federation conflates the two, they believe anyone with your power must either be controlled or destroyed. They cannot imagine that strength and morality can coexist without external regulation. Superman stood, moving to join Kor at the viewport. For a long moment, they stared at the stars in silence. Commander, I've heard this argument before, Superman said quietly. In my universe, I've met beings who claimed they wanted to liberate me from societal constraints. They promised I could be myself without judgment, exercise my full power without restriction. But every single time, their version of liberation meant using my strength to dominate others. Because they were pretenders, Kor replied. They spoke of strength but practiced exploitation. True warriors understand difference. We value honor, Superman. A warrior who breaks oath, who murders helpless, who uses power to crush those who cannot resist, such warriors are executed. Strength without honor is mere brutality. And yet the Klingon Empire conquers worlds, Superman observed. You've subjugated dozens of species, incorporated them into your empire against their will. How is that honorable? Kor's expression hardened. Those species were conquered in honorable combat. They fought, they lost, they accepted reality. This is how power has always been distributed throughout history, through contest. The Federation pretends their way is superior because they conquered through deception and economic leverage rather than open warfare. But make no mistake, Superman, they are Empire just as we are. They simply hide their conquest behind diplomatic language. Superman wanted to argue, to defend the Federation's principles. But after what he'd witnessed at Starbase 11, the fear, the demands for control, the willingness to execute him if he didn't submit, Kor's words carried uncomfortable truth. Before Superman could respond, the ship's alert klaxon sounded. A Klingon officer burst into the commander's quarters. Commander Kor. Federation starships approaching, 3 Constitution-class vessels in attack formation. They are hailing us and demanding we surrender the alien or face immediate military action. Kor's eyes blazed with battle lust. They dare threaten a Klingon vessel in neutral space. This is insult that demands answer. Superman moved toward the door. Commander, don't engage. This is about me, not your empire. Let me handle this. You would face 3 warships alone. Kor's tone carried respect. This is warrior's courage. But Superman, if you leave this ship to face them, you declare allegiance. Everyone will see you chose Klingon over Federation. There is no neutrality after this moment. Superman paused. Kor was right. If he exited a Klingon vessel to face Federation ships, the political symbolism would be unmistakable. The galaxy would interpret it as Superman choosing sides in the great power struggle between Federation and Klingon Empire. But if he stayed aboard, allowed the Klingon to fight the Federation on his behalf, that was equally declarative. There was no neutral path. Commander, Superman said carefully, I don't want war between your people and the Federation. Too many innocents would die. Let me speak with the Federation commanders, try to defuse this before it escalates. They will not listen, Kor predicted. They are too afraid of what you represent. But very well, try your diplomacy, Superman. When it fails, at least you will know you attempted peace before embracing necessity of strength. Superman exited the Klingon vessel and floated in space between the battlecruiser and 3 Federation starships, the Enterprise, the Excalibur, and the Lexington, each carrying 600 crew and enough firepower to sterilize planets. He activated the Starfleet communicator he still carried. This is Superman to Federation vessels. Stand down. I am not a hostile force, and the Klingon have not attacked me. There is no cause for military action here. Captain Kirk's voice responded, carrying barely controlled tension. Superman, you are currently aboard a Klingon military vessel in violation of neutral zone treaties. You fled Federation custody and sought refuge with our enemies. From our perspective, you've chosen sides. I fled imprisonment, Superman corrected. There's a difference between seeking refuge and joining an army. Captain Kirk, I don't want to fight you or your ships. But I also won't return to face execution or slavery. There has to be middle ground. There is middle ground, another voice interjected, Admiral Comac from the Excalibur. Surrender peacefully to Federation custody. Accept monitoring and oversight. Prove your intentions through compliance. That's the middle ground, Superman. That's submission, Superman replied. You're asking me to choose between being your prisoner or your enemy. Can't you see there are other options? Not when you possess your level of power, Comac stated flatly. The Federation cannot allow a being of your capabilities to operate without oversight. It's existential risk we cannot tolerate. Now, you have 60 seconds to surrender before we are authorized to use lethal force. I do not want to do this, Superman. But I will protect the Federation from all threats, foreign and domestic. Superman's enhanced vision observed weapons charging on all 3 starships. Photon torpedoes armed. Phaser banks powered up. And most troubling, specialized emitters that radiated kryptonite wavelengths, turning entire weapons arrays into massive radiation projectors. They were serious. They would actually try to kill him rather than accept his existence as a free being. Behind him, the Klingon battlecruiser powered its weapons as well. Kor was preparing to defend his guest, which would trigger full combat between Federation and Klingon forces. 3 Federation ships against 1 Klingon battlecruiser, normally an even fight. But add Superman to the equation, and the outcome became unpredictable. 30 seconds, Superman, Comac announced. Superman floated in the void between warring civilizations, caught between impossible choices. Fight the Federation and become the villain they feared. Surrender and accept slavery. Or do nothing and watch hundreds die in crossfire meant for him. His superhearing detected heartbeats aboard all 4 vessels, 2,400 Federation crew members, 800 Klingon warriors. Individuals with families, dreams, lives that would end if he made the wrong choice. Captain Kirk, Superman said quietly, I need you to trust me one more time. Can you do that? Kirk's response took 5 seconds, an eternity in tactical time. What are you planning, Superman? Proving that power can coexist with restraint. That strength doesn't require submission or combat. I'm going to show both the Federation and the Klingon Empire that there's a third option they haven't considered. And what option is that? Admiral Comac demanded. Superman smiled, a sad, tired smile that carried 30 years of similar decisions. Walking away. You want me gone from your galaxy? Fine. I'll leave. I'll fly beyond your borders, beyond the neutral zone, beyond the territories of any civilization that views me as threat or prize. I'll find some uninhabited system and stay there until I figure out how to return to my own universe. Superman, you can't just, Kirk began. Yes, I can, Captain. That's what everyone keeps forgetting. I can do almost anything. Including remove myself from your political equations. The Federation doesn't have to cage me. The Klingon don't have to recruit me. I'll simply leave. He turned to address the Klingon battlecruiser. Commander Kor, thank you for your hospitality and your honesty. You were right, the Federation tried to control me because they fear what I represent. But you would have used me as symbol for your own purposes. Both empires see me as tool, not person. I'm tired of being either. Superman accelerated, building velocity that made warp drive look stationary. Within seconds, he'd crossed the neutral zone and disappeared into uncharted space beyond all known territories. Aboard the Enterprise, Kirk stared at the empty space where Superman had been. Mr. Spock, did we just drive away potentially our greatest ally? Indeed, Captain, Spock replied. However, I calculate that his departure may be the optimal outcome. A being of his power operating within galactic politics would inevitably destabilize existing power structures. His self-exile preserves those structures while removing the threat he represented. Or, Kirk said quietly, we just proved we're too afraid of greatness to accept it when it offers friendship. I'm not sure which interpretation is correct, Spock. And that uncertainty troubles me deeply. In the vast emptiness between stars, Superman flew alone, exiled by fear, escaping those who would control or recruit him, searching for some corner of the universe where godlike power could exist without becoming either weapon or cage. And he wondered if such a place existed anywhere in the multiverse. Superman found his sanctuary in the Shackleton Expanse, an uncharted region of space at the galaxy's edge where stellar formation was still occurring, where nebulae swirled in colors that defied description, and where no civilization had yet claimed territory. Here, among newborn stars and primordial matter, he could exist without the weight of others' expectations or fears. He established a base on a moon orbiting a gas giant in an uninhabited system. Using heat vision, he carved living quarters into the moon's rocky interior. Using super strength, he constructed a small observatory where he could watch the stars and listen, always listening with super hearing stretched to its limits, for any sign of the dimensional breach that might return him home. Days passed. Then weeks. The isolation was profound, but not unfamiliar. Superman had always been alone, even in crowds. At least here, the loneliness was honest rather than masked by social pretense. He spent his time cataloging the region's astronomical phenomena, preventing cosmic disasters that threatened forming star systems, and occasionally rescuing primitive spacefaring species from navigational accidents. Small acts of heroism that helped no one's political agenda because no political powers operated here. It should have been peaceful. It should have been enough. But Superman found himself thinking about the Enterprise crew. About Kirk's attempts to bridge the gap between power and democracy. About McCoy's bourbon-fueled conversations regarding loneliness and connection. About Spock's logical yet compassionate attempts to understand an impossible being. He missed them. Missed conversation, debate, the friction of differing perspectives. Missed being around people who challenged him intellectually rather than just fearing or worshipping him. On the 43rd day of his self-imposed exile, Superman's superhearing detected something unexpected, a distress signal. Federation signature, originating approximately 30 light-years from his position. The signal was garbled, damaged, but unmistakable. Someone was dying out here in the unexplored darkness. Superman hesitated. Responding meant revealing his location. Meant potentially re-engaging with the Federation politics he'd escaped. But the signal carried desperation, multiple heartbeats growing weaker, life support failing, death approaching with mathematical certainty. He made his choice in microseconds. Some things transcended politics. Superman flew toward the distress signal, crossing 30 light-years in minutes. What he found made his enhanced vision widen with shock. The USS Yorktown, a Constitution-class starship like the Enterprise, was caught in a massive spatial anomaly. The ship was being torn apart at the molecular level, its hull fragmenting under gravitational stresses that exceeded any natural phenomenon. Escape pods had launched but were being dragged back into the anomaly's event horizon. 437 Federation crew members were dying, and they had perhaps 6 minutes before the ship's antimatter containment failed and caused an explosion that would annihilate everything within 10,000 kilometers. Superman didn't announce his presence or request permission. He simply acted. He flew into the anomaly itself, a decision that would have been instantly fatal for any ship or shuttle. The gravitational forces should have shredded even his invulnerable body. But Superman had learned decades ago that Kryptonian physiology could endure conditions that violated physics. He pushed through the crushing forces, reached the Yorktown's hull, and grabbed. The ship's mass was approximately 190,000 metric tons. The anomaly was pulling it deeper with forces equivalent to a black hole's gravity well. Superman's muscles strained, actually strained, something that rarely happened, as he fought to extract the starship from certain doom. "Come on," he muttered through clenched teeth. "You don't get to die today. None of you do." His heat vision lanced out, cutting through the Yorktown's hull to sever the sections that were too damaged to save. He prioritized the saucer section, where most crew were located, and abandoned the engineering hull that was already fragmenting beyond recovery. Then, with a roar of effort that echoed through the vacuum, Superman tore the Yorktown free from the anomaly's grip. The escape pods were next. 17 small craft, each carrying refugees, all being dragged inexorably toward the anomaly. Superman moved faster than thought, collecting them like a farmer gathering eggs, gentle despite his speed, careful despite his strength. He cradled them against his chest and flew clear of the danger zone. When the Yorktown's abandoned engineering section finally collapsed into the anomaly and detonated, the explosion was contained by the anomaly's gravity well. Superman, the saucer section, and all escape pods were safely distant, battered but alive. The Yorktown's captain, a woman named Erica Hernandez, hailed him immediately, her voice carrying shock and gratitude. "This is Captain Hernandez to whoever just saved us. Identify yourself." Superman floated before the damaged saucer section, cape billowing in solar wind. "Captain, this is Superman. I was in the region and detected your distress signal. Your ship is severely damaged, but your crew is alive. Where's the nearest starbase?" "Starbase 11 is the closest Federation facility," Hernandez replied. "But Superman, you're the one the Federation issued warrants for. If you bring us back, they'll try to arrest you. Probably, Superman agreed. But your crew needs medical attention and repairs that I can't provide. Politics can wait until everyone's safe. Hold on, Captain. This is going to be a long flight. For the next 6 hours, Superman flew through space at maximum velocity compatible with towing a damaged starship. The saucer section trailed behind him like a kite on a string, held by cables he'd fashioned from torn hull plating twisted into superhuman tensile strength. Inside the Yorktown, crew members watched their impossible rescuer through viewports with expressions ranging from awe to fear to profound confusion. This was the being Starfleet Command had declared a threat. This was the alien who'd fled to Klingon space and abandoned the Federation. And here he was, saving them at tremendous personal risk. When Starbase 11 appeared on sensors, Superman transmitted ahead. Starbase 11, this is Superman. I'm bringing in the USS Yorktown, heavily damaged, crew alive but requiring immediate medical attention. I'm not seeking asylum or attempting to enter Federation space. I'm simply delivering people who need help. Please don't shoot at me until they're safe. The response came from Admiral Comac himself. Superman, we read you. Medical teams are standing by. Tractor beams are engaging the Yorktown. You are ordered to remain in position for arrest and detainment. Negative, Admiral. I helped because it was right, not because I'm seeking reconciliation. But I want you to understand something, I don't hate the Federation. I don't want war. I just want to be left alone until I can return home. Is that really so much to ask? Before Comac could respond, another voice cut through the comm channel, Captain Kirk. Superman, it's Jim Kirk. I'm still at Starbase 11. Come down to the station. Not for arrest, for conversation. No weapons, no threats. Just talk. After what you did today, you've earned that much. Superman considered. Every instinct told him to flee, the Federation had already demonstrated their willingness to threaten him with execution. But Kirk's voice carried genuine respect and perhaps the beginning of understanding. I'll come down, Superman decided. But I'm scanning the entire starbase with X-ray vision. If I detect kryptonite weapons or containment systems, I'm leaving immediately. Agreed? Agreed, Kirk confirmed. Meet me in the civilian commerce section, Cafe Milano, 1 hour. Come alone. Superman released the Yorktown to the starbase tractor beams, watched long enough to ensure medical teams were responding, and then flew cautiously toward Starbase 11. His enhanced vision swept the station, millions of components, thousands of people, and yes, kryptonite weapons in the military sections. But the civilian areas were clean. He landed on an external docking platform and walked through corridors where people stopped and stared. Starfleet officers reached for phasers, then hesitated. Were they supposed to arrest him? He'd just saved an entire ship. Civilians whispered, pointed, took images with handheld devices. Superman ignored them all and found Cafe Milano, a small establishment that served food and beverages from Earth to homesick crew members. Kirk sat at a corner table, alone, 2 cups of coffee waiting. Thank you for coming, Kirk said as Superman approached. Sit. Please. Superman sat, the chair creaking under his density. Captain, I want to make something clear. I helped the Yorktown because it was the right thing to do. Not because I'm seeking Federation approval or forgiveness. I know, Kirk replied. And that's exactly why we need to talk. Superman, what you did today, saving that ship and crew despite knowing it would reveal your location and potentially put you at risk, that's heroism. Real heroism, not the political theater that passes for it sometimes. You proved something important. What did I prove, Captain? That I'm useful. That my power has value if properly directed? No, Kirk said firmly. You proved that you can't help yourself. You're a hero, Superman. Not because you have powers, but because when people are dying, you can't walk away. Even when walking away would be safer, smarter, more rational. You act because your conscience demands it. That's not a weakness, that's character. Superman sipped the coffee. It was terrible, but the ritual was comforting. Captain Kirk, your Federation tried to control me because they believe power requires oversight. The Klingon tried to recruit me because they believe might should be exercised without apology. Both were wrong. Power requires responsibility, not oversight. And might should be exercised with compassion, not abandoned. I think, Kirk said slowly, that the Federation Council is beginning to understand that. Your self-exile made an impression. You could have stayed, fought, conquered. Instead, you removed yourself from political equations and isolated yourself in unpopulated space. That's the opposite of what a tyrant would do. Combined with today's rescue, you've demonstrated something the Council couldn't accept before, that you genuinely don't want power over others. So they'll leave me alone now? Superman asked skeptically. I can't promise that, Kirk admitted. But I can tell you that Captain Hernandez has filed a report praising your actions. Her crew, 437 people who would be dead without you, they're talking to anyone who'll listen about how you saved them. Public opinion matters, even in Starfleet Command. You're becoming harder to paint as a threat. Before Superman could respond, alarms blared throughout the starbase. Red alert klaxons, weapons activation warnings, and Uhura's voice over the station-wide comm system, all personnel to battle stations. Unidentified massive vessel emerging from subspace rift. Configuration unknown, power signatures off the scale. Kirk and Superman ran to the nearest observation window. What they saw made Kirk's command instinct scream danger and Superman's Kryptonian heritage trigger ancient genetic memories. A ship, if it could be called a ship, was materializing near Starbase 11. It was enormous. Dwarfing anything in Starfleet or Klingon arsenals. The architecture was geometric and impossibly complex, covered in crystalline structures that pulsed with energy signatures Superman recognized instantly. That's Kryptonian, Superman whispered. That's a Kryptonian warship. But that's impossible. Krypton was destroyed 40 years ago in my universe. There shouldn't be any ships left. The vessel completed its materialization and hung in space like a dark promise. Then it transmitted, not in Federation standard or any known language, but in Kryptonian. Superman's face went pale as he translated. They're saying, we are the survivors of Krypton's military caste. We detected one of our own in this dimension and have come to retrieve him. Surrender Kal-El immediately, or this station and all Federation territories will be eradicated as obstacles to Kryptonian reclamation. Kirk grabbed his communicator. Kirk to Enterprise. Emergency evacuation of Starbase 11. All civilians to escape transports now. But Superman was staring at the warship with an expression Kirk had never seen before, not fear exactly, but profound dread. Captain, you need to evacuate everyone within 10 light-years. Right now. Because if that ship contains who I think it contains, what you've seen me do, the strength, the speed, the power, that's nothing compared to what's coming. Who's on that ship, Superman? Kryptonian soldiers, Superman replied quietly. Military caste warriors who were bred for conquest and trained in Kryptonian martial arts that make me look like an amateur. I was raised by farmers, Captain. I learned to fight by trial and error, taught myself control through accident and necessity. But those soldiers, they've spent lifetimes perfecting the use of powers identical to mine. They're what I could have become if I'd been raised on Krypton instead of Earth. He turned to Kirk, and for the first time since they'd met, Kirk saw genuine fear in the alien's eyes. Captain, I've fought gods and monsters in my universe. I've faced world-ending threats and won. But I've never faced other Kryptonians trained for war. I don't know if I can stop them. I don't know if anyone can. The warship's weapons began charging, energy signatures building to levels that made Starbase 11's sensors scream warnings. And Superman realized with cold certainty that his attempt to avoid galactic politics had just failed spectacularly. Because the war had followed him across dimensions. And this time, the Federation, the Klingon, and every other power in the galaxy were about to learn what terror truly meant when unleashed by beings who made Superman look like a prototype. The Kryptonian warship hung in space like a blade poised at the galaxy's throat. Starbase 11's defensive systems were online, weapons charged, shields at maximum, all pathetically inadequate against technology that predated most Alpha Quadrant civilizations by millennia. Superman stood at the observation window, his supervision analyzing the vessel's configuration. That's a Sagittarii-class hunter, designed during Krypton's colonial expansion era. It carries approximately 50 military-cast Kryptonians, weapon systems powered by miniaturized stellar cores, and hull plating that could probably survive your photon torpedoes without significant damage. 50, Kirk repeated, his tactical mind reeling. 50 beings with your capabilities. Not my capabilities, Captain. Better. I'm self-taught, constrained by human morality, and I've spent 30 years holding back. They were raised in Krypton's martial academies, trained from childhood in combat techniques perfected over 10,000 years, and they have zero compunction about using lethal force. I'm a farmer's son who learned to fly. Their weapons forged in fire. Kirk activated his communicator. Kirk to all ships in range. This is priority 1. All Federation, Klingon, and neutral vessels are to evacuate immediately to minimum safe distance of 20 light-years. A force of hostile Kryptonians is about to engage, and I cannot guarantee anyone's safety. Captain, Uhura's voice came through, we're receiving dozens of responses. Ships are refusing to evacuate. The Enterprise, the Excalibur, 3 Klingon battlecruisers, even a Romulan observer vessel, everyone wants to see what happens next. Then they're going to witness a massacre, Superman said quietly. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. Before Kirk could respond, the Kryptonian warship transmitted again. This time, a holographic image appeared, a Kryptonian male in military armor, his features similar to Superman's but harder, colder. His eyes held the certainty of someone who'd never doubted his right to dominate. I am Commander Zor-El, Supreme Military Commander of Krypton's Survivor Fleet, the hologram announced in perfect Federation standard. They'd obviously been monitoring communications. We have scanned this dimension and detected Kal-El, son of Jor-El and Lara Lorvan, citizens of Krypton's science caste. By law of Krypton's military governance, all surviving Kryptonians are required to report to military authority for integration into the Survivor Fleet. Kal-El will surrender himself within one of your Earth hours, or we will demonstrate what Kryptonian military power means. The hologram shifted focus, directly addressing Superman. Cousin Kal-El, yes, we are family, distant but bound by blood. You were sent to Earth as an infant to preserve the House of El. But you were never meant to become soft, to adopt alien morality, or to hide among primitives. Your father Jor-El was a great scientist, but he was wrong about many things. Krypton did not die completely. We survived. And now, we reclaim what is ours, including you. The transmission ended. Superman's jaw was clenched so tight Kirk could hear his teeth grinding with pressure that would crush steel. He called you cousin, Kirk observed. The House of El was extensive, Superman replied. Hundreds of family members across multiple branches. If Zor-El survived, he would have been my second cousin, I think. His father was a war hero. The family was always disappointed that my father pursued science instead of military service. They thought it was weakness. Can you defeat him? Superman was silent for a long moment. In a straight fight? Maybe. We'd have similar power levels, both charged by yellow sun radiation, both possessing the same basic capabilities. But he has training I lack, combat experience I've never needed, and he'll fight to kill while I'm trying to subdue. That's a significant tactical disadvantage. And the other 49 Kryptonians? I'd lose. Quickly. Captain, I need you to understand something. When I fought the Covenant elites, I was holding back to avoid killing. When I disabled the Romulan ship, I used precision to prevent casualties. I've spent my entire life restraining myself because unlimited force causes collateral damage. But Kryptonian military doctrine doesn't care about collateral damage. They'll kill everyone on this starbase just to prove a point, and they'll do it faster than your defenses can respond. Kirk's command instincts engaged. Then we need to change the tactical equation. Superman, you said they're charged by yellow sun radiation? Yes. Just like me. What happens if we remove the yellow sun from the equation? Superman's eyes widened with understanding. Captain, are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we even the odds. Mr. Spock. The Vulcan science officer had been listening from the Starbase Operations Center. His voice came through the communicator with typical precision. Captain, I calculate you are proposing to use stellar engineering to temporarily convert this system's sun to red giant configuration, thereby depriving the Kryptonian warriors of their power source. While theoretically possible using quantum torpedoes to trigger specific fusion reactions in the star's core, the process would require approximately 14 minutes to complete and would render Superman equally powerless. I know, Kirk said, looking at Superman. Which means you'd have to hold them off for 14 minutes while retaining full power, knowing that once the sun changes, you'll be as vulnerable as they are. Can you do that? Superman stared at Kirk, recognizing what the captain was really asking. Could Superman sacrifice his godlike abilities, render himself mortal, and trust that human ingenuity and courage would be sufficient to defeat an enemy that had terrified him? Could he have faith in fragile flesh when invulnerability had been his shield for 30 years? If I lose my powers, Superman said slowly, and they manage to kill me before you stop them, there's no going back. I'll be dead. Permanently. No resurrection, no second chances. I know, Kirk replied. But if you don't help us level the playing field, everyone on this starbase dies. Everyone in the surrounding systems. Maybe everyone in the Federation, because I don't think conventional weapons can stop 50 Kryptonians with unlimited power. You have to make a choice, Superman. Trust yourself with godlike abilities, or trust us with human courage. For 30 years, Superman had been the most powerful being in his universe. He'd stopped wars, prevented disasters, saved millions. His power had been absolute, his capabilities beyond measure. And now Kirk was asking him to give it all up based on faith that mortal beings could triumph against impossible odds. Superman thought of Jonathan and Martha Kent, who'd raised him with love despite knowing he could accidentally kill them with a careless gesture. He thought of the Enterprise crew, who'd offered friendship even while fearing what he represented. He thought of Captain Hernandez and her crew, whom he'd saved not because he had to, but because it was right. He thought about what it meant to have power. Not just to possess it, but to know when to surrender it. Do it, Superman said. Convert the sun. I'll hold them for 14 minutes. And Captain? If I don't make it, tell your Federation I never wanted to be a god. I just wanted to help. Kirk gripped Superman's shoulder, a gesture of respect between warriors facing impossible odds. You've got 14 minutes. Make them count. Superman flew from the starbase, accelerating toward the Kryptonian warship at velocities that left plasma trails across the vacuum. He transmitted in Kryptonian, his voice carrying across the void, Zor-El. You want me? Come get me. But leave these people alone. Our quarrel is with each other, not with them. The warship's bay doors opened, and they emerged. 50 Kryptonian warriors in military armor, their capes billowing in solar wind, their eyes glowing red with heat vision ready to deploy. They spread out in perfect tactical formation, no wasted movement, no unnecessary flourish. Pure military efficiency. Zor-El floated at the center, his expression carrying grim satisfaction. Cousin Kal-El. You were always meant for more than playing hero to primitive aliens. Join us. Help us rebuild Krypton's empire across this new dimension. With your power and our discipline, we could rule galaxies. I don't want to rule, Superman replied. I want to protect. Protection is just another word for dominance, Zor-El countered. You protect because you are stronger. You save because you can impose your will on disasters. This is power, cousin. Accept what you are. I know what I am, Superman said quietly. I'm someone who chooses restraint over conquest. Compassion over dominance. And I'm someone who's about to fight 50 trained warriors for 14 minutes to give my friends a chance to stop you. Zor-El's expression shifted to confusion, then rage as he realized what Superman meant. You allied with them. Chose primitives over your own people. You are traitor to Krypton. Krypton is dead, Superman replied. I'm choosing the living. Then he attacked. Superman moved faster than he'd ever moved before, no restraint, no holding back, pure Kryptonian capability unleashed. He targeted Zor-El first, the command authority, hoping to disrupt their formation. His fist connected with Zor-El's jaw with force that would have shattered planets, sending the military commander spinning through space. But the other 49 warriors were already responding. They moved as a unit, decades of coordinated training allowing them to predict each other's actions with perfect precision. Heat vision lanced from multiple angles. Super strong hands grabbed Superman's limbs. Freeze breath attempted to immobilize him. Superman fought like he'd never fought before. He used every technique he'd learned through 30 years of improvised combat, wrestling moves from stopping dockyard brawls, martial arts adapted from human fighting styles, and raw Kryptonian power unleashed without reservation. He grabbed 2 warriors and threw them into a third. Used heat vision to blind a cluster attempting to coordinate their attack. Flew in unpredictable patterns to prevent them from establishing firing solutions. Fought with everything he had. And he was losing. For every warrior he disabled, 2 more pressed the attack. They were simply better trained, more coordinated, and completely willing to kill while he was still trying to subdue without lethal force. 8 minutes, Spock's voice came through Superman's communicator. The stellar conversion is proceeding. Maintain defensive posture. Superman's ribs cracked, actually cracked, something that hadn't happened in years. A Kryptonian warrior had landed a blow with technique that concentrated force through a molecular-level pressure point. His vision blurred as another warrior's heat vision grazed his temple. His cape was shredded, his costume torn, and he was bleeding from a dozen wounds that wouldn't have been possible an hour ago. But he kept fighting. Kept moving. Kept buying time. Zor-El recovered from Superman's initial strike and rejoined the battle, his expression murderous. You were weak on Earth, cousin. They taught you compassion instead of conquest. Made you soft. But we will correct that weakness either by recruiting you or destroying you. For minutes, Spock reported. Superman, your biosigns are critical. Heart rate elevated, multiple contusions, significant tissue damage. You must withdraw. Can't, Superman gasped, blocking 3 simultaneous strikes and countering with a desperate haymaker that sent one warrior spinning away. They'll pursue. Target the starbase. Can't let that happen. The sun began to change. Superman could feel it, the yellow radiation that had powered him for 30 years shifting wavelengths, growing redder, weaker. His strength was fading, his invulnerability diminishing. And around him, 50 Kryptonian warriors were experiencing the same depowerment. But they recognized what was happening faster than Superman expected. Military training meant they drilled for power loss scenarios. They regrouped instantly, shifted from energy-intensive attacks to pure hand-to-hand combat, and moved to eliminate Superman before he could exploit their temporary weakness. 1 minute, Spock announced. Stellar conversion 90% complete. All Kryptonians will be reduced to baseline power in 53 seconds. Superman felt his flight failing. He began to fall, actually fall, subject to gravity for the first time in decades. His invulnerability was gone. His strength was fading to merely human levels. And 50 trained killers were descending on him with lethal intent. Then the Enterprise and 6 other starships appeared, phasers firing. But they weren't targeting Superman or the Kryptonians. They were firing at the Kryptonian warship's weapons systems, crippling it before it could provide support to the now vulnerable warriors. And from the Klingon battlecruisers came boarding parties, not attacking Superman, but engaging the depowered Kryptonian military caste in hand-to-hand combat that Klingon excelled at. Without their powers, the Kryptonians were still trained fighters, but they were facing Klingon warriors who'd spent lifetimes perfecting close-quarters combat. The Red Sun effect completed. Superman fell toward Starbase 11's docking bay, caught at the last moment by the station's emergency tractor beam. He was mortal now. Vulnerable. His broken ribs were just broken ribs, no longer healing at super speed. His wounds bled freely. But he was alive. And around him, the depowered Kryptonian military caste was being overwhelmed by sheer numbers, Federation and Klingon forces working together for the first time in decades, united against a common threat. Superman, lying on a medical bed as Dr. McCoy frantically worked to stabilize his injuries, managed a weak smile. Because family isn't defined by blood or power, Zor-El. It's defined by choice. And I chose them. The Kryptonian warship, its weapons disabled and its crew depowered, surrendered. The Federation had captured 50 Kryptonian warriors who would need to be contained, studied, and potentially rehabilitated. The Red Sun conversion would wear off in approximately 6 hours, at which point everyone's powers would return. But in that window, something unprecedented had occurred. Mortal beings had defeated gods through cooperation, courage, and the willingness to trust each other across political boundaries. Kirk stood over Superman's medical bed, looking at the now vulnerable alien who'd sacrificed everything to give them a fighting chance. You gave up your powers. Trusted us to finish what you started. That took more courage than any display of strength. Had to prove something, Captain, Superman whispered, his voice weak but determined. Had to prove that power isn't what makes someone valuable. That weakness doesn't mean worthless. That sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is trust others to carry you when you fall. You proved it, Kirk said firmly. And Superman? When your powers return in 6 hours, the Federation Council has agreed to grant you autonomous status. No monitoring, no control, no imprisonment. You've earned the right to be free. Superman closed his eyes, a tear rolling down his bruised cheek. For the first time in 30 years, someone had seen him vulnerable, mortal, and bleeding, and had chosen to help rather than exploit that weakness. It was, he realized, the greatest gift anyone had ever given him. 6 hours later, Superman stood in the observation lounge of the Enterprise, feeling his powers return as the system's sun reverted to its natural yellow spectrum. Strength flooded back into his muscles. Invulnerability restored itself cell by cell. His broken ribs knitted together in seconds, wounds closed, and the profound vulnerability of mortality receded like a nightmare at dawn. But something had changed. For 6 hours, Superman had been human, fragile, mortal, dependent on others for survival. Dr. McCoy had set his broken bones. Nurse Chapel had cleaned his wounds. Captain Kirk had stood guard while he slept, ensuring no one exploited his vulnerability. The Enterprise crew had protected him when he couldn't protect himself. They'd proven something he'd always hoped but never truly believed, that his value wasn't contingent on his power. That people could care about him as a person rather than fear or worship him as a god. How do you feel? Captain Kirk asked, entering the lounge with 2 cups of coffee. Different, Superman admitted, accepting the coffee. For 30 years, I've been invulnerable. Physical pain was something I remembered from childhood but never experienced as an adult. Those 6 hours reminded me what mortality feels like. The fear. The fragility. The dependence on others. It was humbling. And now that your powers are back. Superman flexed his hand, watching the muscles respond with superhuman precision. Now I understand what I am better than ever before. I'm not a god, Captain Kirk. I'm just someone who happens to have extraordinary abilities. The powers don't define me, my choices do. And I choose to use these abilities to help, not dominate. Kirk sipped his coffee, studying the alien who'd become something approaching a friend. The Federation Council is meeting to determine what to do with the captured Kryptonians. 50 military-trained warriors with your capabilities represents a significant security concern. What are the options? Imprisonment under red sun radiation, essentially keeping them permanently depowered. Exile to an uninhabited dimension. Or execution as hostile combatants who invaded Federation space with lethal intent. Kirk's expression showed his distaste for all three options. None are ideal, but we can't simply release trained killers with godlike powers. Superman was quiet for a long moment. Captain, I'd like to request custody of them. Let me take responsibility for the Kryptonian survivors. Kirk's eyebrows rose. Custody? Superman, these are the people who tried to kill you 6 hours ago. They're also the last remnants of my species, Superman replied. Zor-El and his warriors were raised in Krypton's military culture. They were taught that might makes right, that conquest is glory, and that compassion is weakness. But they can be taught differently. I was. If I'd been raised on Krypton instead of Earth, I might be exactly like them. They deserve a chance to choose a different path. You're proposing rehabilitation, Kirk said skeptically. For 50 beings with planetary destruction capabilities. I'm proposing giving them what my parents gave me, an alternative to violence. A chance to learn that strength can serve rather than dominate. It won't be easy. Many will reject it. But Captain, if we execute them or imprison them forever, we prove their philosophy correct. We demonstrate that power can only be answered with power. I'd rather prove them wrong. Kirk was silent, considering. Finally, he tapped his communicator. Kirk to Spock. Convene the senior staff. We need to discuss Superman's proposal regarding the Kryptonian prisoners. The briefing room filled quickly. Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Uhura, Sulu, and Chekhov assembled alongside representatives from Starfleet Command participating via subspace communication. Superman stood before them, making his case. The Kryptonian military caste represents a unique challenge, he began. They possess capabilities that exceed most known species, they're trained for conquest, and they genuinely believe their philosophy is correct. Imprisonment or execution will only validate their worldview, that power determines right, and we're simply exercising our temporary advantage while they're vulnerable. And your alternative? Admiral Kamak asked via viewscreen, his tone skeptical but not immediately dismissive. Give me custody. I'll take them to the Shackleton Expanse, the region where I've been living. Under red sun radiation, they'll be depowered. I'll work with them individually, teach them what my parents taught me. Show them that strength can coexist with compassion. Some will reject it. Those individuals can remain depowered and confined. But others might learn. Might choose differently. And those individuals could become the foundation of a new Kryptonian culture, one that values protection over conquest. You're asking us to trust you with 50 potential weapons of mass destruction, Kamak observed. I'm asking you to trust that change is possible, Superman corrected. That people aren't defined solely by their worst moments or their cultural conditioning. Admiral, the Federation was founded on the principle that diverse species can cooperate despite different backgrounds. These Kryptonians were raised in a militaristic culture, but they're not inherently evil. They're products of their environment. Change that environment, and you change the potential outcomes. McCoy leaned forward. Superman's got a point, Admiral. I've examined the Kryptonian prisoners. Physically, they're identical to him, same capabilities, same vulnerabilities. But psychologically, they're victims of cultural indoctrination. They were raised in a society that valued conquest and scorned compassion. That's learned behavior, not genetic destiny. Given different circumstances, they could develop different values. Spock added his analysis. Logically, Superman's proposal offers several advantages. First, he is the only individual we know who can physically restrain Kryptonians if they become hostile. Second, his personal experience with Kryptonian abilities makes him uniquely qualified to understand their psychology. Third, successful rehabilitation would transform a security threat into potential allies. The odds of complete success are approximately 11.3%, but partial success, rehabilitating even a fraction of the prisoners, would be preferable to execution or permanent imprisonment. 11% doesn't inspire confidence, Mr. Spock, Comac replied. Yet it exceeds the 0% probability of positive outcome from execution, Spock countered. Kirk stood, addressing the view screen directly. Admiral, I've watched Superman sacrifice his powers to give us a chance against an overwhelming threat. He trusted us when he had no reason to. I think we owe him the same trust. Let him try to rehabilitate the Kryptonians. We can establish monitoring protocols, require regular reports, and maintain the ability to intervene if the situation becomes dangerous. But let's at least try the path that doesn't involve executing 50 prisoners of war. The debate continued for 2 hours. Starfleet Command consulted. The Federation Council weighed options. Legal precedents were cited. Ethical frameworks were debated. Finally, Admiral Comac's image reappeared on the view screen. Superman, the Federation Council has reached a decision. You will be granted provisional custody of the Kryptonian prisoners under the following conditions. They will be held in the Shackleton Expanse under red sun radiation. You will submit to quarterly evaluations by Federation psychologists to assess rehabilitation progress. Any prisoner deemed irredeemable will be transferred to Federation custody for permanent containment. And if any Kryptonian escapes and commits violent acts, you will be held personally responsible. Do you accept these terms? I do, Superman said without hesitation. Thank you, Admiral. I won't let you down. See that you don't, Comac replied. Because if this experiment fails, Superman, it won't just be 50 Kryptonians who face consequences. It will be your credibility, your freedom, and potentially your life. The Federation is extending remarkable trust. Honor it. The transmission ended. McCoy clapped Superman on the shoulder. Well, congratulations. You just became the galaxy's most unusual correctional officer. Got any idea how to actually rehabilitate warrior gods? None whatsoever, Superman admitted with a slight smile. But I'll figure it out. I always do. The transport of 50 Kryptonian prisoners to the Shackleton Expanse took 3 days. They were held in specialized containment fields aboard the Enterprise, bathed in red sun radiation that kept them depowered and manageable. Superman spent hours talking with them individually, trying to understand their perspectives. Zor-El remained defiant. You are traitor, Kal-El. You abandoned Krypton's legacy for alien sentimentality. When we escape, and we will escape, we will remind you what Kryptonian military discipline means. But others were less certain. A young warrior named Dev M, barely 20 years old, asked questions that suggested curiosity rather than condemnation. Kal-El, when you fought us, you held back. Even when we were killing you, you tried to subdue rather than destroy. Why? Our training taught us that mercy to enemies is weakness that invites exploitation. Because I've learned something your training didn't teach, Superman replied. That everyone deserves a chance to choose differently. That today's enemy might be tomorrow's friend if you're willing to extend respect instead of just force. Dev M, you were raised to believe might makes right. But I was raised to believe right makes might. And I've spent 30 years proving that philosophy works. But you lost, Dev M pointed out. We were defeating you. Only your alien allies' trickery with the sun saved you. I didn't lose, Superman corrected gently. I accomplished my mission, protected innocence and bought time for a tactical solution. Victory isn't always about defeating every enemy through force. Sometimes it's about achieving your objectives despite overwhelming odds. I kept you from killing thousands of people. That's a win. Dev-M was silent, processing this perspective that contradicted everything he'd been taught. The Shackleton Expanse base grew from Superman's simple observatory into a complex rehabilitation facility. Using his powers, Superman constructed living quarters for each prisoner, comfortable but secure, built into asteroids bathed in red sun radiation that kept them depowered. He established common areas for meals, education, and recreation. Created training facilities where they could exercise and maintain their physical conditioning without accessing their full powers. And every day, he talked with them. Shared his experiences. Challenged their assumptions. Demonstrated through his own choices that power and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. Progress was slow. Most prisoners remained hostile, viewing Superman as a traitor and the rehabilitation effort as elaborate imprisonment. But a few, Dev-M, a female warrior named Kara Zor-El, and 3 others, began to question. Began to consider that perhaps Kryptonian military philosophy wasn't the only valid framework. 6 months into the rehabilitation program, Captain Kirk visited the facility aboard the Enterprise. He found Superman working in what appeared to be a classroom, teaching a dozen Kryptonians about Earth's history, specifically, humanity's evolution from tribal warfare to cooperative civilization. So your species spent 10,000 years killing each other over territory, resources, and ideology, Zor-El said skeptically. And now you claim to have transcended that violence through something called democracy and human rights. Forgive my doubt, Kal-El, but your species still wages war. We've reviewed your Federation's history. You fought Klingon, Romulans, countless others. You haven't transcended violence, you've merely become better at justifying it. You're right, Superman agreed, surprising them. Humanity hasn't perfected peace. The Federation still fights wars, still struggles with the gap between ideals and reality. But the difference is that they're trying. They've built institutions designed to minimize violence, established principles that value life over conquest, and created frameworks where different species can coexist despite historical enmities. It's imperfect, but it's better than the alternative. And the alternative is? Kara Zor-El asked. Krypton, Superman said quietly. A civilization so convinced of its own superiority that it conquered dozens of worlds, enslaved or exterminated species it deemed inferior, and ultimately destroyed itself through arrogance and refusal to adapt. Our homeworld is gone, Kara. Not because of external enemies, but because Kryptonian society was so rigid, so certain of its own correctness, that it couldn't see the geological instability that would kill billions. The classroom was silent. I'm not asking you to abandon Kryptonian identity, Superman continued. I'm asking you to evolve it. To take the best parts, the discipline, the honor, the commitment to excellence, and combine them with compassion, flexibility, and respect for others. That's what I've done. I'm still Kryptonian, but I'm also more than that. You can be too. Kirk waited until the class ended before approaching. How's it going? Slowly, Superman admitted. Most still view me as a traitor. But a few are starting to question their conditioning. Dev-M asked me yesterday if I could teach him to fly without using force to dominate. Kara wants to learn about medicine, apparently she's interested in healing instead of destruction. It's not much, but it's progress. The Federation Council is pleased with your reports, Kirk said. They're considering expanding the program, granting provisional citizenship to Kryptonians who complete rehabilitation successfully. Citizenship? Superman's eyes widened. Captain, that's more than I hoped for. You've proven that change is possible, Kirk replied. That even beings raised for conquest can choose differently when given alternatives. The Federation believes in second chances, Superman. We're willing to extend that belief to your people. Superman felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope for a future that included both his Kryptonian heritage and the values he'd learned on Earth. A future where power and compassion could coexist. Where strength served rather than dominated. Thank you, Captain, Superman said quietly. For trusting me. For giving us this chance. Thank you for reminding us what the Federation should aspire to be, Kirk replied. Now, I believe Admiral Comac and several council members want to tour your facility. Think your students are ready to demonstrate they're more than just weapons? Superman smiled. Let's find out. As Kirk and Superman walked through the rehabilitation facility, passing Kryptonians engaged in education rather than conquest, training in discipline rather than destruction, and beginning to imagine futures beyond warfare, both men recognized they were witnessing something unprecedented. The transformation of warriors into guardians. The evolution of a culture from domination to cooperation. The proof that no one, not even godlike beings raised for violence, was beyond redemption if offered genuine alternatives. It would take years. Decades, perhaps. But for the first time since Krypton's destruction, Superman wasn't alone. He had family again, not defined by blood or power, but by the shared journey toward becoming something better than what they'd been designed to be. And in the vast darkness between stars, hope took root and grew. 1 year after the Kryptonian rehabilitation program began, Superman stood on the observation deck of his expanded facility, watching Dev-Em lead a rescue operation. A civilian transport had suffered catastrophic engine failure near the Expanse, life support failing, 300 passengers facing slow death by asphyxiation. Dev-Em and 4 other rehabilitated Kryptonians, operating under controlled yellow sun exposure that restored their powers to approximately 60%, were conducting the rescue with precision that would have impressed any Starfleet crew. No grandstanding, no excessive force. Just efficient, compassionate intervention that prioritized saving lives over demonstrating dominance. He's come a long way, Captain Kirk observed, standing beside Superman. The Enterprise had become a regular visitor to the facility, Kirk serving as both Federation liaison and Superman's friend. Dev-Em was the first to truly commit to change, Superman said with quiet pride. He asked me once why I bothered saving people who feared me. I told him it was because fear doesn't determine worth, actions do. He's internalized that lesson. 2 months ago, he prevented a Romulan border incursion by negotiating rather than fighting. The Romulans were so surprised by a Kryptonian choosing diplomacy that they actually listened. The Federation Council has noticed, Kirk replied. They're proposing to grant Dev-Em full citizenship and commission him as a special envoy. A Kryptonian warrior choosing peace over conquest sends a powerful message. What about the others? Superman asked. Zor-El and the hardliners. Kirk's expression darkened. 23 prisoners remain resistant to rehabilitation. They refuse education, decline interaction, and spend their time plotting escape or revenge. The Council is concerned. Some members are calling for permanent incarceration or exile to an uninhabited dimension. They need more time, Superman argued. Zor-El was raised in Krypton's military culture for 40 years. Expecting him to transform after 12 months is unrealistic. Superman, I agree with you in principle. But the Council has a point, maintaining 23 hostile Kryptonians in containment requires enormous resources and carries significant risk. If even one escapes during full power restoration, the consequences could be catastrophic. Before Superman could respond, his superhearing detected something that made his blood run cold. A subspace transmission, encrypted but decipherable to his enhanced senses, originating from within the facility. Someone was communicating with an external source. Captain, we have a problem. Superman flew to the containment wing at maximum speed, Kirk transported directly via emergency protocol. They arrived to find Zor-El's cell empty, the red sun radiation generators sabotaged, and 12 other cells showing signs of forced egress. How is this possible? Kirk demanded, his hand moving to his phaser. The security systems were compromised from the inside, Superman said grimly, examining the damaged generators. Someone with technical knowledge disabled the safeguards and created a window where yellow sun radiation could reach the containment cells. Zor-El and 12 others are fully powered and loose in the facility. Alarms blared throughout the complex. Automatic bulkheads sealed, emergency containment fields activated, and Superman's carefully rehabilitated Kryptonians rushed to defensive positions. But they were outnumbered and facing warriors with decades more combat experience. The facility's communication system crackled with Zor-El's voice, amplified to reach every corner of the complex. Attention all Kryptonians. I have tolerated this humiliation for 1 year, allowed myself to be depowered and lectured by a traitor who abandoned his heritage. But no more. Our people did not survive Krypton's death to become pets of primitive aliens. We are the Kryptonian military caste, we are conquerors, not servants. Zor-El, stand down. Superman's voice boomed through the facility with equal volume. You're fully powered, but so am I. You remember what happened last time we fought. Don't make me prove it again. Last time, I had 49 warriors at my command, Zor-El replied. This time, I have only 12 loyal soldiers. But this time, cousin, I know your weakness. You won't kill. You'll try to subdue, to capture, to preserve our worthless lives. That compassion will destroy you. 13 Kryptonian warriors burst through bulkheads like they were paper. Zor-El led the assault, his eyes glowing red with heat vision ready to deploy. The rehabilitated Kryptonians moved to intercept, Dev-Em and his team positioning themselves between the attackers and the facility's civilian sections where Federation personnel worked. We don't want to fight you, Dev-Em announced, though his stance suggested readiness for combat. Zor-El, you taught us that Kryptonian honor demands we face challenges with courage. I challenge you to honorable single combat. You and me. Winner determines the outcome. Zor-El laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. You dare invoke honor while serving aliens? You are no Kryptonian, Dev-Em. You are Kal-El's corrupted creation. And I will destroy you to prove how worthless his philosophy truly is. The fight that erupted was beyond anything Kirk had witnessed. Kryptonians battling Kryptonians, beings of godlike power locked in combat that shattered asteroid walls and created energy discharges visible from light years away. Dev-Em fought with skill Superman had taught him, combining Earth's martial arts with Kryptonian capabilities. But Zor-El's decades of military training showed in every move. Superman engaged 3 attackers simultaneously, his experience and raw determination allowing him to hold them at bay. But he was still trying to subdue rather than kill, and that restraint was a disadvantage against opponents who showed no such mercy. Kirk coordinated with the Enterprise, which had moved into defensive position. Mr. Spock, prepare to implement Protocol Crimson. If Superman falls and the hostile Kryptonians break containment, we convert the Sun to red giant configuration again. Captain, such action would depower all Kryptonians, including those fighting to protect the facility, Spock replied. Dev-Em and his team would be rendered vulnerable to execution by the hostile forces. I know, Kirk said grimly. But if we lose this fight, 13 hostile Kryptonians with full powers will be loose in the galaxy. We can't allow that. The battle raged for 17 minutes. Superman fought with everything he had, speed, strength, heat vision, freeze breath, every capability he'd perfected over 30 years. Dev-Em and his team fought with courage that proved they'd internalized Superman's teachings about protecting others even at personal cost. But Zor-El's forces were gaining ground. 2 of Dev-Em's team were down, injured but alive. Superman was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his costume shredded, fighting 3 opponents who coordinated their attacks with military precision. Then something unexpected happened. Kara Zor-El, one of the prisoners who'd shown promise but hadn't fully committed to rehabilitation, emerged from the containment wing. She'd been among those who escaped but hadn't yet engaged in combat. Now she floated between Superman and Zor-El's forces, her expression carrying the weight of a profound decision. Zor-El, Kara said quietly, I have spent 1 year in this facility. 1 year listening to Kal-El speak of compassion, watching him demonstrate that strength can serve rather than dominate. I didn't believe him. I thought it was weakness disguised as philosophy. Then you understand, Zor-El began. I understand that I was wrong, Kara interrupted. 3 months ago, Kal-El allowed me supervised access to yellow sun radiation. I was fully powered for 6 hours, free to escape or attack. He trusted me despite having no guarantee I wouldn't betray that trust. Do you know what I did, Zor-El? You escaped, obviously. That's why you're here now. I helped a Federation medical team perform emergency surgery on a dying child, Kara said. Used my heat vision for cauterization at microscopic precision. Used my strength to stabilize a collapsing lung. Used my speed to retrieve medication from the Enterprise in seconds. I saved a life, Zor-El. For the first time in my existence, I used Kryptonian powers to create rather than destroy. And it felt right. More right than any conquest I ever participated in. She turned to face Superman, her expression carrying resolve. Kal-El, I formally request permission to defend this facility and the values you've been teaching us. I choose rehabilitation over resistance. I choose protecting over conquering. I choose your path over Zor-El's. Superman's eyes widened with surprised hope. Kara, you don't have to. Yes, I do, she interrupted. Because if I don't stand for what I believe, then I'm just another prisoner hiding behind excuses. Dev-Em is right. This is about honor. And honor demands I fight for what I've learned is true. Kara Zor-El attacked Zor-El with ferocity that stunned everyone. She'd been his second-in-command, his most trusted warrior. Her betrayal, no, her choice, shifted the balance instantly. Other prisoners who'd been wavering saw her stand, saw her choose Superman's philosophy over Zor-El's violence, and 7 more emerged to join the defense. Now it was 21 Kryptonians defending the facility against 13 attackers. The odds had reversed. Zor-El fought with desperate fury, recognizing his rebellion was failing. Traitors. All of you. You abandoned Krypton's legacy for alien weakness. You dishonor our people. No, Zor-El, Superman said, pressing his attack while now supported by multiple allies. We're honoring Krypton by becoming what it should have been, strong without being cruel, powerful without being tyrannical, confident without being arrogant. You're clinging to the philosophy that destroyed our homeworld. We're building something new. The battle's conclusion was inevitable. Zor-El and his 12 loyal warriors, outnumbered and facing coordinated opposition, were overwhelmed and subdued. The rehabilitation facility's containment systems, damaged but functional, secured them once more under red sun radiation. In the aftermath, Superman stood among his students, no longer prisoners, but genuine allies who'd chosen his path voluntarily. Dev-Em nursed a broken arm, healing slowly under reduced sun exposure. Kara Zor-El had burns across her shoulders from heat vision impacts. Others showed various injuries, but all wore expressions of pride. You chose, Superman said simply. When the moment came, when you could have joined Zor-El or remained neutral, you chose to defend what you believed in. That's what makes you more than warriors. That's what makes you heroes. We chose because you gave us the choice, Dev-Em replied. On Krypton, we followed orders without question. Here, you taught us to question, to evaluate, to decide for ourselves what's right. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given us, autonomy backed by moral framework. Kirk approached, his expression mixing relief and awe. Superman, the Federation Council is going to hear about this. 21 Kryptonians choosing rehabilitation over rebellion, fighting to defend the very facility that held them prisoner. That's unprecedented. It's proof that change is possible, Superman replied. That even beings raised for violence can choose differently when offered genuine alternatives. Captain, I think we've created something important here. Not just a rehabilitation program, but the foundation of a new Kryptonian culture, one that preserves our strength while embracing compassion. Over the following months, the facility evolved from prison to academy. The 21 rehabilitated Kryptonians became instructors, helping newly arrived Kryptonians, discovered occasionally in stasis pods or frozen in the remains of Krypton's colonial expansion, learn the balance between power and responsibility. Dev-M accepted the Federation's offer and became special envoy to the Klingon Empire, his warrior background allowing him to relate to Klingon culture while his rehabilitation taught him to channel that culture toward cooperation rather than conquest. Kara Zor-El joined Starfleet Medical, using her Kryptonian abilities to perform surgeries and interventions impossible for baseline humans. She became known throughout the Federation as the Angel of Mercy, a being of godlike power dedicated to healing rather than harm. Others found their own paths. Some joined exploration vessels, using their abilities to survive environments that would kill unprotected humans. Some became engineers, their super strength allowing construction projects that would otherwise take years. Some became teachers, ambassadors, scientists, each finding ways to use Kryptonian capabilities to serve rather than dominate. And Zor-El? He remained in containment, bitter and defiant, clinging to the philosophy that had defined his existence. But even he occasionally watched his former subordinates through security feeds, seeing them thrive in roles he'd never imagined possible. Sometimes, late at night when the facility was quiet, Superman visited Zor-El's cell. "They're happy, cousin," Superman would say softly. Dev-M prevented a war last month through negotiation. Kara saved 300 lives during a medical crisis on Vulcan. They're using their strength to build rather than destroy. They're more than warriors now. They're heroes. Zor-El never responded. But Superman could see the conflict in his cousin's eyes, pride in their accomplishments warring with the conviction that such accomplishments were beneath Kryptonian dignity. Change took time. Superman understood that better than anyone. He'd spent 30 years learning to balance power with compassion, strength with restraint, confidence with humility. Zor-El would need time too. But time was something Superman had in abundance. And hope, once nearly extinguished by fear and rejection, had been rekindled by the choices of 21 Kryptonians who'd proven that redemption wasn't just possible, but achievable. 5 years after the rehabilitation program began, the Federation formally recognized the Kryptonian Academy as an independent institution. Superman was granted dual citizenship, Kryptonian by birth, Federation by choice. And the Academy's first graduating class, 53 Kryptonians who completed the full rehabilitation program, dispersed throughout the galaxy to demonstrate that power could coexist with compassion, that strength could serve rather than dominate, and that even beings raised for conquest could choose to become guardians instead. Captain Kirk attended the graduation ceremony aboard the Enterprise, which had become the Academy's primary liaison with the Federation. He stood beside Superman, watching Kryptonian graduates receive their certifications and assignments, and marveled at how far they'd all come. "You did it," Kirk said quietly. "You proved that change is possible. That even the most unlikely beings can be redeemed if offered genuine alternatives." "We did it," Superman corrected. "I provided the example, but you provided the opportunity. The Federation chose trust over fear, cooperation over control. That's what made this possible. Without your willingness to take a chance on us, none of this would exist." Kirk extended his hand. "To the future, then. To a galaxy where power serves justice, where strength protects the vulnerable, and where beings of all capabilities can coexist peacefully." Superman shook Kirk's hand, carefully, always carefully, but with genuine warmth. "To the future, Captain. And to the ongoing journey of learning what it means to be more than what we were designed to be." As the ceremony concluded and Kryptonian graduates dispersed to their assignments throughout the Federation, Superman stood at the observation window of his facility, now an academy, a home, a symbol of what was possible when fear gave way to hope. He thought of Jonathan and Martha Kent, who'd raised him with love despite knowing he could accidentally destroy them. He thought of the Enterprise crew, who'd offered friendship despite fearing what he represented. He thought of the Federation Council, who'd chosen trust despite every rational reason to choose control. And he thought of Dev M, Kara, and all the others who'd chosen change over certainty, growth over stagnation, compassion over conquest. Superman had come to this universe by accident, fleeing from one war only to encounter new conflicts. He'd been feared, threatened, rejected, and forced to prove his worth again and again. But through it all, he'd maintained the core belief his parents had taught him, that power without compassion was tyranny, but power with compassion could change worlds. He'd proven it. Not just for himself, but for an entire species learning to transcend their violent heritage. In the observation window's reflection, Superman saw not just the invulnerable alien who'd arrived years ago, but the teacher, friend, and guardian he'd become. Still powerful beyond measure, but now surrounded by others who understood that strength, true strength, wasn't measured in the capacity to destroy, but in the choice to protect. And somewhere in the vast multiverse, in dimensions and realities beyond counting, other versions of himself faced other challenges. But here, in this universe, in this moment, Superman had finally found what he'd always sought, a place where godlike power could coexist with mortal values, where strength served justice rather than replaced it, and where the question wasn't what beings were capable of, but what they chose to do with those capabilities. The journey had been long, painful, and uncertain. But it had been worth it. Because in the end, Superman had learned the most important lesson of all, that the greatest power wasn't strength, speed, or invulnerability. It was the courage to change, the wisdom to admit uncertainty, and the faith that others could rise to meet their potential if given the chance. And that power, he realized, was truly unlimited. Superman's arrival in the Star Trek universe had challenged every assumption about power, responsibility, and the relationship between extraordinary individuals and democratic societies. What began as a refugee crisis became a profound exploration of how civilizations respond to beings who transcend their ability to control or constrain. The Federation learned that fear, however rational, could not be the foundation for policy toward the powerful. That trust, extended despite risk, sometimes yielded outcomes impossible through coercion. That the galaxy's most dangerous threats could become its greatest guardians when offered respect rather than chains. Superman learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that depending on others didn't diminish his strength, and that the values his parents taught him, compassion, restraint, service, were universal principles that transcended dimensional boundaries. He'd found family not in blood but in choice, discovered allies not through domination but through demonstrated character, and built a legacy that would outlast his physical existence. The Kryptonian Academy stood as testament to what was possible when power met purpose, when strength served justice, and when beings designed for conquest chose protection instead. Its graduates dispersed throughout the Federation and beyond, each carrying forward Superman's teachings, that abilities don't define destiny, that heritage isn't fate, and that the greatest heroes are those who choose compassion despite possessing the power to enforce any alternative. Years would pass. Challenges would arise. Some Kryptonians would fail, succumb to old patterns, require additional intervention. But others would exceed every expectation, becoming symbols of hope across the galaxy, proof that no one, regardless of their power or past, was beyond redemption. Kirk visited regularly, their friendship transcending the vast philosophical differences between soldier and explorer, warrior and diplomat. They would sit beneath alien stars, drinking coffee or blood wine or whatever beverages the galaxy offered, and discuss the eternal questions. What is justice? How do you balance individual freedom with collective security? Can democracy survive gods? Should gods accept democratic constraints? They never found complete answers. But the searching, the ongoing dialogue between mortal limitation and godlike capability, that was where wisdom lived. Eventually, Superman's dimensional breach was located and stabilized. The choice was offered: return to his home universe, where his Earth waited and needed him, or remain in this reality where he'd built something unprecedented. The choice, as always, was his. Whatever he decided, both universes would be better for his presence. Because Superman's greatest power wasn't strength, it was the ability to inspire others to become their best selves, to prove that change was always possible, and to demonstrate that even beings with the power to move planets could choose to move hearts instead. And that power, the power to change minds and transform societies through demonstrated character rather than forced compliance, that was the power that truly changed universes. Live long and prosper.